Well, good evening, Doug, and it's a thrill to have Phil on. The last time Phil and I were on a show was years ago, and when I interviewed him on one of my shows. But Philip is one of the principals in Dry Harvest Food, and for people that would like to know, I don't think there's a guy in the country that has his fingers on the pulse of the food situation more so than Phil. But tonight, Doug and Joe, we want to talk about just all levels of preparedness, and the idea is that obviously if people want to send emails, you two can moderate the questions, but I want to turn it over to Phil just to let him give his introduction, because again, when he wrote the book No Such Thing as Doomsday, he provided an antidote for fear, and I guess that's what we're trying to do tonight, is provide an antidote for fear. We've got a breadth of time waiting for whatever hammer to drop or fall that's going to fall. So I think it's important that people understand that they can take expedient measures, and so have their plans in place and be ready to initiate them and start to live the way that they're going to live in the future now. So, Phil, welcome. Nice to be on the radio with you again.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Mr. Hagman. It's interesting times we live in, and I'll be honest with you, I gave up years ago trying to be a prognosticator. I guess that's a fortune teller, right? It's really hard to tell what the future is going to be, but it doesn't take, as old Bob Dylan used to say, it doesn't take a weatherman to see which way the wind blows. If you look at all the things that are going out there, whether it's international politics, whether it's the economy, whether it's even environmental issues, whether they're man-made or whatnot, they're all kind of pointing to the same point somewhere in the future here, where we're coming to a point of resolution, kind of like throwing a breaker and resetting a machine. And it's just common sense that people need to get out of their, what would I call it, their autopilot mode, and stop taking things for granted and start looking at the essentials of life and what practical things they should be doing and heeding to make sure that the best welfare is going to be there in the future for their families and especially their children. We're in kind of an interesting area here where there's no doubt that we're moving into a depression. And I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist, and I'm really into positive mental attitude and self-improvement. But I remember that Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, he had a little clause in there that really stuck in my mind. He was talking about the Great Depression and how there was a lot of people that were really into positive mental attitude and self-improvement. And when the Depression came, they actually were totally wasted economically. And he said what his explanation was that even though they were into positive mental attitude, they were ignoring what was going on around them. And so I think the key is that we need to focus on a desired outcome, but we've got to be alert and aware. We've got to notice what's going on around us and take expedient steps, because I really believe that life brings us everything we need to do what we need to do. And that's a belief. Call it life, call it God, call it whatever you want. That is something I have found in small things in my life. That's a lesson I learned, and it works. You can't always see where it's going to come from. And it may not be what you wanted, but in the end, in some greater stream of wisdom, it's exactly what you needed. So, getting back to where we're sitting today, if you take a look at this country and the economic situation we are with our fiat currency, and if we look at the examples that have happened in history, this is a house of cards that inevitably is going to have to fall down. It's nothing but a pyramid scheme. Now, I'm not going to go any farther than that, but that's just the reality of the situation that we are faced with, all right? Now, the last time we had a serious depression, at least the country was in a decentralized mode, and this is the key issue. Right now, we live in a country that has highly centralized infrastructures. Back in the 1930s, most of our food production throughout the country was decentralized. In a collapse, the best place to be is in a third world country, believe it or not, because everything is done locally. When we look at modern-day America with the metropolitan areas, heavily populated, concentrated populations, and everything dependent on food deliveries. Not only is it dependent on food deliveries, but over the last 20 years, computerization has made stocking of food in cities and grocery stores and warehouses much more cost-effective. In other words, instead of holding larger stockpiles of food to distribute to the grocery stores, they're all computerized. And a lot of what they deliver one day is based on computer-generated cash register reports from the day before. So we don't have a lot of residual food sitting in the major cities, in the grocery stores. We get our oranges and produce from Florida and California and Mexico. We get apples and produce from New Zealand. We're really addicted to these grocery stores. And we're really addicted to the deliveries that the 18-wheelers bring in. So if there's any little element that comes in there, all right, if it's something that takes down our computer systems, if fuel decides to go up to $9 a gallon, if fuel becomes unavailable or there's shortages of it, there's a lot of little cogs in the link. If we have a major power breakdown, there's a lot of things that could really disrupt life as we know it today. In other words, what I'm trying to impress is it's a very delicate and fragile infrastructure that we take for granted. We just assume, since it's always been there, that it's going to be that way forever. What I recommend to people is you need to go and start at the basics. And I guess for the people that have been there and done this for years, it may sound a little redundant, but for the newer people, the basic thing is you need water, you need food, you need the ability to maintain security and to protect your family. You need shelter, you need warmth. And, you can shuffle those around in any amount of, different priorities to each one. But the first thing you need to do is take a look at and figure out what is an achievable step. One of the problems that people run into all the time is they realize that they're vulnerable finally, all right? But the task of getting prepared is so overwhelming that they just say they can't deal with it. They go into denial. And it's the same thing with a lot of the truth that is out there today. Let's face it, our mainstream media is nothing but a propaganda machine. It's just very much more sophisticated than the one in the Soviet Union, but nonetheless, it is a very sophisticated Hollywood-styled propaganda machine. And a lot of people, when you try to give them truth and show what's really going on, it is so threatening to their reality, to their sense of security, what they always thought was solid. And humans have this intense need for a sense of security. They have kind of a herd instinct. And they also will defend beliefs. People put identity on beliefs. And it's like they've got to defend those beliefs. Even if they're irrational, it's like so much of their identity and their sense of security hangs on that. And so just like when we try to tell somebody that they really should be prepared, a lot of people can't face that because it undermines the foundations of everything they've always assumed, It's just too much to deal with. So I go back to my premise that life brings us everything we need to do what we need to do as long as we're paying attention. So the first thing to do is start it at the first step. Start looking at your family, what you buy every week, and start figuring out what you need in the event that there were shortages. And let's face it, there's a lot of people that are into this mentality that whenever they have an hour of need or a crisis, the government is going to be there to bail them out. Well, you ask the people down in that lived through Katrina, what they think about that philosophy. And the bottom line is you're responsible for your family, and you need to be prepared to feed, protect, shelter, and take care of your family. So look at food. See how much food you're taking care of, you're buying over a week's time. Start at a very basic thing. You don't have to deal with the whole process overnight if that's not within your budget. Just go out and go pick up extra jars of applesauce, extra jars of spaghetti sauce. If you're in the position to go out and buy long-term food storage, dehydrated, freeze-dried food, there's many companies out there. Of course, our company, Dry Harvest Food, we think we got the best product in the industry, and we've worked hard over the years to do it. But you don't even have to go that far. You can just start going down to the grocery store. Now, there's this thing out there that people put out about, they say, well, people who put food away are hoarders. And that is the most illogical and irrational statement. It's very manipulative. The point is if you put away food for your family now, when it's available, it's abundantly available right now. It's getting more expensive, but it's available. Then if something happens, if there are shortages, all right, you are going to be in a position where you do not have to compete for the minimal resources available during a shortage. You're an asset. Not only are you not having to compete for food out there during a crisis and a shortage, but you're in a position to help your neighbors and friends. So the idea of having food storage is not about hoarding. It's about being a stable pillar in the community, someone that other people can lean on, who weren't quite so smart or attentive. So anyhow, the other thing, food, we put that out of the way. One of the other aspects, and it's not the second one in line, but I think it's important, humans, our minds can race and think about crazy things when we don't know what's going on. So if the power goes down, the TVs go out, it's good to have some sort of battery or hand crank radio or something so you can hear at least what they're telling you on the radio, so your imagination is not running wild. The other thing, a similar thing, is people can get very depressed and insecure when they're in the dark. And it's a very simple thing to fix. Just having flashlights, batteries, they make these crank-up flashlights and lanterns. Have that in place. But really the second thing in line, or it may even be the first, probably the first, is water purification. Especially people who live in California or some of these dry places that are fed water from distribution aquifers, water is a huge issue. A lot of people down in California, they've got swimming pools, and if they have a way of purifying that water, that's a good source of water for them. It's kind of hard to store water in many ways. You can store it, but it's usually, 3 to 6 months. You got to dump it and fill it again. So it's really important to have some way to filter and purify what I would call surface water, water that you get out of a river, a creek, a pond. Of course, the old Boy Scout way is boil it for 10 minutes. and that's a usable option. Like my house, it's kind of nice. I got a creek running right by my house, and it's right off a mountain stream. I can boil that water. I've got a well that's only 22 feet deep. I can put a hand pump in that. But I've also got a shelter with 3 diesel generators in it, so and an electric and a hand pump in it. So got a few toys there. So water is very important. Lighting is important. Your food is of extreme importance, because I don't know how many people have actually had to go hungry for any short period of time, but I remember one time that I was out in the backcountry elk hunting, and the guy I was with, we got crazy enough we decided we were going to chase a herd of elk back up into the mountains. And after a while, we realized we were so far back in the mountains we couldn't get out by night. And it's amazing. You start burning up calories, and with a lot of physical exercise, how it impacts your energy levels to be without food for a day or so, when you've got intense physical activity. So, well, anyhow, I should probably give Steve or one of you other guys a chance to talk and close my mouth for a while and see what else somebody wants to contribute to.
Well, Doug, one of the things I think that we should tackle first and foremost is the water issue, because most people who live in apartments and most people who live are let's say, the elderly. I want to suggest that they start to do this now. Most people who own their own home or even own a multi-bedroom, multi-bathroom apartment can begin to take a real basic step for about $25 off of Amazon. And there's a really neat deal. Here's the thing. Water is everything. I just returned from Jackson Hole. One of my projects this summer has been to take aerial photographs of the great rivers in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and then to cover it photographically by land. And I've got to tell you, the drought monitor that I put up on my website today, showing 65-point-some% lower water levels, I think it's the highest in 12 years, meaning the highest drought. I can tell people from literally flying hundreds of miles of some of the foremost rivers in this part of the country, whether it's the Yellowstone, whether it's the Gallatin, the Madison, the Jefferson, whether it's the Snake River in Wyoming, and absolutely seeing the devastation that the drought is bringing, and watching hay go from, I think, $80 a ton in Bozeman, Montana, all the way up to $280 to $300 a ton. The point is that water is critical. So we want to make this a practical time tonight. There's a thing on Amazon, and the designer of this sent me one of his storage, if you will, bathtub storage liners, and it's called a water bob, a B-O-B, okay? Imagine most people don't realize that bathtub can be one of the most life-saving things they own, not just from a sanitation standpoint, but the average bathtub carries about 50 gallons of water. So imagine a liner, a food-grade plastic liner that you put in your bathtub, and then you fill your bathtub well you can with water, and up to 50 gallons. And they provide a siphon, a little neat hand pump that you can pump it into, let's say any container or whatever. Now, again, the key is we're going to talk about sanitation, too, expedient sanitation. But, ladies and gentlemen, you can go on Amazon, you can look up the Water Bob, B-O-B, emergency drinking water storage. It's probably one of the neatest things I've ever seen, because we're going to talk tonight about not only sheltering in place, and a lot of people say that we always talk about running to the woods, and at a certain point, that was my primary mentality. But knowing now that literally our woods are alive with more than the sound of music, and as you know, Doug, we've been talking about all the reports of foreign NATO troops. And by the way, let me just get this out of the way. Those of you that don't understand that Hillary Clinton signed the U.S. Or the United States over to the United Nations a small weapons ban treaty, under the United Nations Security Protocol, France, Germany, Russia, China, the U.S., and several other nations are here at some point to enforce the gun confiscation and gun ban. And so, while it used to be, everyone's, I guess you'd say, at least those who live in the wilderness or close to it,
to run into the woods, that may no longer be the most practical thing at this point. And so, basically we've got to cover everything. But the most important thing everybody has got to understand, it's not enough just to have water. You also have to have a way of containing that water. Obviously, in the home, if you have your own hot water heater, you can take the hot water heater. Most homes have maybe 40, 50 gallons worth of water. You'll have to purify it. And one of the most important and the most least expensive substances is plain old Clorox bleach, okay? Clorox bleach, whether it's a chemical, a biological attack, ultimately everything that is critical to keep clean or stay disinfected can be done with Clorox. And Clorox, and I'm not talking about the scented, pretty smelling stuff. I'm talking about plain old bleach. I think some of the the discount stores, you can get 4 or 5 gallon things of bleach for under $10. What's bleach worth when the trucks have stopped, as Phil has stated? So first of all, we got to deal with what we're going to do if we have to stay where we're at. Now, here's another thing, Doug and Joe. We've talked extensively about on your show about the fact that watching Katrina, it is conceivable that people will be ordered out of their homes. Everyone has to, quote, choose to make a stand, and if they're going to be ordered out of their homes, then the last place they want to do or end up is in a FEMA camp. For 15, 20 years, Alex Jones, myself, and others have warned and warned and warned. And Doug, the ridicule and the scorn, and that just comes with the territory. But now we've got it. We've got a situation where the greatest nation in the world, once great nation, is now absolutely a basket case. So much so that Ross Perot, on the front of Drudge today, said he fears for this country that because of our financial position, we could be absolutely devastated and taken over. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Everything that you think is still property of the United States government and your property as citizens has already been sold, bartered, traded, or pledged. So you got to get over that old paradigm, and I think that's what Phil is saying. Here's the bottom line. Tonight, everyone, you cannot expect anybody to come to your rescue, except, in my opinion, obviously the living God, but it's like Noah had to build the ark. God could have built him an ark, probably would have been an amazing ark, but Noah had to do the possible, and it was God who did the impossible. So saying all that, just something as simple as a bathtub. Water to drink takes preeminence over water to shower with. And obviously, when you're washing dishes and everything else, you can purify the water through drip filters. You can purify it through hand pump membrane filters. There are so many great ways to purify water, but I think we have to do this in stage one. Stage one, you prepare where you're going to, where you're currently at, and do the best you can. Stage two is what's known as having a back door. And I want to throw a word out here that I want everybody to incorporate. It was taught to me by Gabriel Suarez. One of his classes, one of his instructors, Suarez, S-U-A-R-E-Z International. I put up Gabe Suarez's essay on why it's right for Christians to defend themselves. And for any of you that have ever read anything on my website, self-defense is not a denial of faith. You've got people out there beheading people for their faith. You've got people basically saying, if you don't convert to this, you'll be murdered, slaughtered, martyred, whatever. So he has a word called an OODA, O-O-D-A loop. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No. Nope.
Okay. Well, basically it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. It's usually put into, he teaches, in a self-defense posture. It's like you can no longer, and when I say you, I'm using that euphemistically, we can no longer deny what's out there. It's coming at us fast and furious, to quote an illegal gun-running program to the drug gangs. But it's coming so quickly that sometimes you get a sensory overload. And I understand in doing shows like this that everything has to be staged to appropriate levels of understanding, and the people have already done this. They say, I want to hear some new stuff. Well, it's good to be reminded, because for everyone who's stored water, you got to store 3 and 4 times what you have, and you have to identify sources of water away from you, whether they be springs, creeks, artesian wells, abandoned water wells that may still be fills wells 22 feet that still may be shallow enough and usable. Most people wouldn't even have the right wrench in their backpack. Maybe they'd have a Gerber multi-tool or whatever, but there are ways on shallow wells, and knowing the terrain, there's so much to cover. But ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that just understand that a bathtub will buy you at least 30 days, no pun intended, worth of drinking water if it's stored, you can go to Amazon and you can go on the Bob Emergency Drinking Water Storage. Then the next issue we got to deal with is sanitation. Where do you use the facilities if your toilets don't flush because the water's out and the power's out? Well, fortunately, there are answers to that. And one of the neatest answers to that is called the PET, P-E-T-T, toilet. It's Phillips Environmental Toilet Technology. Bill Phillips was a friend of mine. He passed away several years ago, but I remember when he started developing that. And basically, it's a porta potty with a black bag that contains specific chemicals that neutralize the odor and neutralize the bacteria in whatever the contaminant, and basically it coagulates the liquid, the urine, and you get these, like, if you will, sealed bags that you can then put in a bigger trash can with construction grade. Now here's the key: construction grade bags. Construction grade bags are usually, I think, 3 mil and above, not the little lawn and garden bags, because the thing you want to remember is this: after eating, after drinking, sanitation is critical. If you don't take care of the sanitation, you get disease. If you get disease, there's no places to run. And Doug and Joe, the bottom line is that intentionally medical and medicine and medical supplies are being cut off to doctors. They're being cut off to hospitals, and they're all going into the underground bunkers and deep underground military bases. And the bottom line is that people have got to recognize that there are ways to store even insulin without power. They have to understand that when the 18-wheelers stop, everything stops. So remember the OODA loop, okay? Observe. Orient. Orient means you look around and you see yourself in position as you relate to the environment around you. Decide, if this happens, this is how I'm going to act, okay? This is what I'm going to do. For instance, if you observe somebody that's tracking you or basically watching your every move and paralleling your move on the opposite side of the street, you want to put something between you and the individual, let's say a stalker, someone who's a rapist for the ladies. And by the way, hopefully tonight we're going to get into the self-defense situation. We'll make some specific recommendations on firearms. But again, the food and the sanitation, all this stuff goes hand in hand. And I know this is going to sound a little bit basic, but what goes in one end is going to come out the other. Now, that may sound simplistic, but right now there's going to be a diaper, D-I-A-P-E-R, and throwaway diaper. They're going to be in deep trouble, the people that use throwaway diapers. Most American women, not all, but most American moms have gotten used to throwaway diapers. Well, the one thing that most people don't consider is that obviously if you've got an infant and he or she is in diapers and you don't have water and all you have is the old linen diapers, you've got to have some thoughts in mind on how you're going to deal with this, because eventually you run out of baby wipes and eventually you run out of diapers, or you just basically have got to come to the conclusion that you're going to have to think in realms you've never thought before. And I think if I could speak for Phil and myself, this is it. You can no longer stay in everything that you've known that has been comfortable. We're seeing more and more people on the streets. We're seeing veterans treated like animals. We're seeing veterans abandoned by the government they sold. And I watched the veteran issue, 950,000 veterans still waiting for specific medical care. And if you're politically incorrect as a veteran and you've served your country in a hero's capacity, they won't even pay for your basic stuff. And if you're in the world of ultra black or have been in any of the ultra secret stuff, I mean, if you don't toe the line, they cut you off. So tonight we're talking about how a person can approach the basics of food, water, sanitation, protection, and have Plan A, sheltering in place, Plan B, where do I go, and then we'll talk about Plan C, how do I get there.
Very good. And Gentlemen, let me ask this question, if I may. What I'm reading here is we're going to be addressing really, there's only two options. You either shelter in place or you leave. You've got to make that decision, what you're going to do. But you're going to help us on the practical applications of both. If we decide to shelter in place, obviously, for example, water, the bathtub. If we have to leave, water, you're looking for maybe some type of portable filtration system. That's so we can adapt to the environment, is what you're saying, right? Pretty simplistic.
Well, right, and Phil has made his mark in building people some up to multi-million-dollar underground bunkers. But the bottom line is that it's not lost on the people that do doomsday prepping and stuff that they've tipped their hand. Here's the golden rule of prepping: do it and shut up. Okay? Would you agree with that, Phil?
Yes, and also I think another little aspect is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And
amen.
Some people have this concept that they're going to get in, and defend a fixed position. And in Sun Tzu, one of the key elements was never engage a superior military force. In other words, your best salvation is a good set of running shoes.
I second that emotion.
And some people think they're gonna hunker down and do this or that. Well, that's all fine if all you're dealing with is kind of local rogue elements. But please, if there's any people out there that have any illusions of how they're going to fight a battle with a rogue government, they should kind of throw that one out the window. There's just too many examples of people that went down doing that. And I'm not even suggesting it. I'm just saying, if the government gets crazy, have a good pair of running shoes and don't try and engage them. Just try and stay out of their way. They're going to be occupied enough if they ever decide to declare martial law that the average deputy doesn't go more than 100 feet off a paved road. So,
wow.
Anyhow, don't get into fantasies about fighting with authority. Just try and stay out of their way and don't make trouble for them.
No, you make a good point, because we have too many people that seem to be, too confident, overconfident. Like if something were to go wrong, that they're prepared enough to where they can withstand anything, and kind of have this illusion. And some people call them, trigger happy, wanting the revolution to start.
The weekend warrior mentality.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. And people have to understand this is not a road we want to go down, but this is a road we must cover so that people who are aware, in tune with the Lord Jesus Christ, and have that discernment to know what to do to protect themselves and their family, and be in the best position if things go wrong, and when things with the economy here in America go wrong.
Hey, Steve, let me ask you a question. And this is something I got a couple of emails on today in anticipation of tonight's program. Quite simply, if you can share your thoughts on when do you know when it's time to leave, or like you personally, when you make a decision to leave or you make a decision to stay. I mean, if you make a decision to shelter in place and stay, what would change that decision for you?
Well, I don't think I'm a good example, because let me say this: someone that's not high profile, and obviously I don't lie to myself, and by the grace of God to others, I understand how high profile anybody, and you know this to be true too, Doug. The thing is, the average person must understand that the plan. Now, this is why I believe in the power of prayer, and I also believe in the power of exposure. But the plan isn't to go into some areas of the country. At some point, the entire country is to be disarmed. So imagine a grid, and imagine in that grid of, let's say, 100 homes, there are 34 gun owners. I'm making this up, okay? And the 34 gun owners were already marked by the GPS positioning census guys that were told go to the front door. Well, it doesn't get any easier for an invading army or the United Nations Security Council under the guise of UN resolutions to go house to house, because they've already got 34% of the 100 tagged, if you will, and now all they got to do is bag them. The idea of throwing your guns in the lake or saying, well, yeah, gee, I had a boating accident, they have an answer for the guys that have answers like that. It's called basically El Presidente, 2 to the body, 1 to the head, okay? You know what that is, Doug, from tactical training. Yep. The point I'm trying to make is this, is that the average person will have to decide ahead of time where they would go. Let me give you a good example. Some people say, well, I'm going to run into the woods. I'm going to go to this park or this area campground. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They've already got sensors in those campgrounds. Most of the biggest campgrounds in the country already have sensors. Some of them are hidden in trees. Some of them are hidden in posts. And they have automatic license recognition. So let's say Steve Quayle decides he wants to head into the Highlight Foothills, and this is a real area, okay, campground, and hang out there while everyone shoots everyone up. Wrong, because they'll tag me on my license. Here's something that people have got to understand. The best thing you can do is to deprive the enemy of his ability to monitor. And when you cut out the monitoring, you cut out the ability for them to have an advantage. So let me give you an example. Anybody who's gone to an intersection, sees intersection cameras, or has noticed that police now have license recognition cameras where they can, let's say, drive through a parking lot and pick up and scan all the license plates, and if they've got an arrest warrant or a notification or whatever, they automatically, where they would have had to physically scan or read everything, the computer does it for them. So, Doug, the critical point is to have a place, and it's just like the early Christians. Well, the early Christians running for their lives in Rome went into the catacombs, but obviously drones and everything else they've got going on is going to make it even more difficult. So it's not the difficulty I want people to focus on, but it's the understanding that certain events will take place. I just sent to Doug, and then I'll turn it back to Phil, too, about, his thoughts, because even though he's built shelters, I think if you're paying attention to what he's saying, is those may be good for a time, but ultimately you cannot defend a fixed position, okay? You cannot. And so for the people that are forced because of their age or health issues, then I really believe in the supernatural, and I do. I live in this world, covering power of prayer. That doesn't mean that you can take anything for granted, but it does mean that if you're going to decide to go and hide someplace other than where they're going to be looking for you in the woods. Good example, for those of you in cities, underground parking garages give you a lot of protection, and there are areas, and so people can learn basic skills. I'm talking about people now who are able and have the physical strength and the mental ability, to basically even get a book on basic lock picking and understand that there's a lot of maintenance rooms and parking garages and basements, that the best place to hide out may be right in the middle of everyone, because they're going to be worried about encirclement. Encirclement basically means what we're seeing in Montana, Idaho, and the border states, is that the foreign troops are already cataloging, photographing, and sometimes even one of my listeners, I think, Doug, was harassed by snipers, and the reason why she was being harassed, and obviously they didn't kill her or her family by the grace of God, but because her home is on the Montana-Canadian border. And I wish I would have put that into the alert, because I think that's what some people miss. So encirclement means if you're going to run, let's say everybody says, well, I'm not going to stick around the U.S., I'm going to run to Canada. Wrong. Canada just signed a new secret agreement, and may not be secret anymore, but U.S. our citizens are going to be denied any form of official, when you want to go to another country, what's the word I want? Where you're seeking asylum, okay? Right. There's going to be no political asylum offered to Americans trying to get into Canada, which then I get the Canadian listeners writing, well, what's going to happen to Canada? Well, the bottom line is a New World Order is real in Canada as it is in the United States. So the idea is real simple, ladies and gentlemen. They're not just coming to take your guns away. They're not just coming to take your gold away. They're coming to take you away, and then they take your stuff. So that's what we're trying to talk about tonight, is some alternatives alternative plans. People are emailing me, Doug, should I get an RV? Should I get this? Should I get that? Well, yeah, you can get an RV, but you can't just expect to go to a campground and be safe in that RV unless you're off the radar. If you've never had any run-ins with the law, if you're not on the computer, you listen to talk radio, you've got some anonymity still. But you've got to assume that all anonymity is breached and therefore act accordingly. Disguises. You know, it's funny because where is it now? It's illegal to wear any form of disguise. Well, the reason they're trying to make a law against wearing any form of disguise is like, let's say, a super high-dollar Halloween mask or something, is because that interferes with their biometric identification of everyone. So the day will come, and it's already here, that, as Phil brought up, that, you know, even having a shortwave radio during World War II was the grounds for the Gestapo come and shoot you in Germany. It looks like their grandchildren are going to do the same thing in the United States. I can tell you real-time intel where hams who have been keeping track of different things going on in the country have already been murdered in this country. It's not tough. If you're a ham radio operator, you got to file your location, everything with the FCC, and obviously you've got a radio tower. It doesn't take too much of a scientist to understand that you're already on their list. And so the point that I'm trying to make for everyone tonight is you must assume that we are now under occupation and act accordingly. You know, whether we get an EMP strike, whether we get a clandestine nuclear or a singular or multiple, whether it be a dirty bomb or a small yield nuclear weapon, whatever the excuse is to bring us under martial law. Martial law, by the way, let me spell it for everybody. It's M-A-R-T-I-A-L. If I see one more person writing it M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L like Marshall Dillon, I'm going to shake my head. That simply means that the rule of law and your constitutional guarantees are suspended. They already are, but most people don't know that. And you are subject to the military tribunal. That includes summary execution. So what's at stake here, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, is that now we've got the situation where the terrorists are in the White House, and I'm talking about some of them that have been hired and put in the highest offices, Department of Homeland Security, and you as a freedom-loving veteran are the enemy. You as a Bible-believing Christian are the enemy. You as a self-sufficient American are the enemy. The vilification has gone on to such a degree that now everybody outside of them is the enemy, and that's why they introduced, meaning the powers that be, the Luciferians, the globalists, have introduced the word zombie. So the water will be cut off, the food will be cut off, and the only place you'll be able to get 3 square meals, or even 2, will be in the camps. There'll be what I call show camps, where the people on the green list, those who they think they can turn around to be good, faithful serfs, but everybody else, it's not a good position to be. So tonight we want to cover the basics, the practical, and again, the tactical. And I have a statement, tactical is practical. If you're going to be practical, you've got to be tactical. You've got to not only decide how you're going to, or what you're going to need to live, but you also, I have a dear friend who just went and she's getting a handgun and she's being taught how to shoot the handgun. And I would say to every woman out there that's listening to my voice, and every man that's never had one who loves your family, the bottom line is you need to get correct firearm instruction, because Sam Colt at the end did make the statement. And again, Gabriel Suarez has written some of the best articles on the Christian and self-defense. Doug, I had a guy that wanted to buy $500,000 worth of gold. I think I may have told you this, Phil, and yet he did want to own a gun. I said, okay, so you're going to buy the gold to protect your financial assets, but you don't even want to buy. And by the way, I didn't sell him the gold. He and I, by the end of our conversation, I think as far as the East is from the West, so are we apart, you know? Because the point is, I said, your family's life is more important than just protecting your financial well-being. And to make a long story short, I don't believe people understand the serious nature of this. Expedient fallout shelters. If there should be a nuclear detonation, everyone should go on Shane Connor's website, K, the letter K as kangaroo, I, the letter I as in India, the number 4, the numeral 4, and then U as in uniform, KI4U.com, and Shane's got voluminous amounts of free information. The other book everyone can download free, I'm going to say this 3 times, Nuclear War Survival Skills. It's Nuclear War Survival Skills by Cresson, Cresson, Kearney, Kearney. Those are the issues. They've got everything you can basically want to know about radiation, fallout, etc. in those books. But tonight,
here's the thing. We're talking about hurrying up and getting moving because you think about this, I think about this during our waking hours. The computers that crank on into the nights, into the weeks, into the months, into the years, they've got every contingency except one, and obviously that I say that's God. But the bottom line is that they are going to do their best to control and contain everything. And in a martial law environment, containment, meaning you, and making sure you can do no harm to them will be their number one priority. And like one guy told me, he says, we got more than enough Hellfire missiles, Steve, to take out the loudest mouse. And obviously he was aiming that statement at me and Alex and others. I mean, he named them by name to me. And he said, you guys think that you'll even get a chance to get a shot off? Well, you're wrong. Well, here's the deal. I'd still take a shot even if I knew that I had, a hellfire incoming and only God's holy fire could protect me from the hellfire. But here's where people have to get it together. Their food, their water. Water and food go hand in hand. And they have to have a way, as Phil said, to access the international data stream. There's a great company. They're not one of my sponsors. They used to be. But Radiolabs.com. Radiolabs.com. Everyone listening to this broadcast around the world, and by the way, there are people listening to this broadcast that will be listening to it on CDs, etc., needs to have a shortwave radio. Radiolabs, Chris at Radiolabs, they make a super Sangean 909. It's a great receiver. You can't transmit it on it, but you can receive. So we've got something called communication. And I think the biggest and toughest thing that I'm still working through, Doug, is who can you trust? Because I can only share this, and I think this is critical, ladies and gentlemen, and I say this with no apologies. Unless God gives you people you can trust, be aware that there will be too many people who are on the shill's paid list that they'll try and move in to you and against you. So that's the one answer I don't have outside of, the tree is known by the fruit it bears. If somebody isn't a prepper, they talk the talk but won't walk the walk. If somebody wants you to do for them what they won't do for themselves, I would say this: run, jump into space, do whatever you can do. And I'm just being facetious there, but get away from them as fast as you can. Pastor David Langford, you had him on your show. He had a great statement. I asked David, I said, David, how do you decide who you can trust? He said, well, I pray about it, Steve. But he says there's only really 2 types of people, those who give and those who take. The takers are known by their insatiable appetite, and the givers are known by their unrelenting desire to help others. And so the point is that, that's the one thing I can't do, Doug, is tell people who to trust. Because, brother, I've been in the preparedness business for 35 years, and I can tell you this, the point, you'll be surprised who and how sophisticated the powers that be will get to get you to say or do something that you wish you would have never said or done. And by the grace of God, only He can take you out of the snares. And I'll turn it back to Phil.
Yeah, just to dovetail with what you said, Steve, and Mr. Hogue. I mean, having worked as an operational asset for the Department of Justice back in the 90s, myself, I can tell you this: the authorities operate on betrayal. I mean, look, the people you think are your friends, I mean, they will exploit every avenue to get information or to get whatever their target is. They're going to use you to get that, and that's for everybody. And so this is a very tactical and practical thing to understand. Betrayal is something that everyone has to address in their lives today, right now, because one slip that you've got a month's worth of food or whatever, and you're the go-to person. One slip and you're going to be a target for whoever might be after that, whether they're good guys, bad guys, or people that just they're going to be hungry. And they're going to be hungry people, by the way. So I didn't mean to interrupt you folks. I didn't mean to interrupt the flow of thought, but very good advice. To decide, who you can trust.
Right. I've
ahead,
seen some of these people around. One of their telltale things is they'll come into town and they'll talk real big and talk about doing radical and crazy things, and the way I deal with them is just confront them and say, you're one of two things: you're either crazy or you're a paid government agent. And if you look at all this so-called white supremacist stuff, in just about every situation in half of our so-called terrorist attempts, it always involved some FBI guy who comes into town that's got a bunch of money. That in the case of out in Idaho, he went in and got these dumb farmers drunk, started talking crazy stuff, got them in the car, drove across the state line with explosives in the trunk, and of course there was a trap, just a road checkpoint waiting for him. And then all of a sudden there's a big splash in the media. They caught these terrorists that were going to go to Washington and blow up a radio talk show host because he was a liberal. But of course, 5 years down the road, when they finally get the case into court, it all gets thrown out of court. It gets dropped because it's obvious that it was entrapment, and these guys didn't even know what they were up to. And that Houthi militia, how do you pronounce it up there? It's a similar thing. All those guys, I think, without exception, they dropped charges on all of them.
Right, the Houthis, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
But it was important. What was important to them was to splash this stuff out on the media and impress on the public who are gullible to it, that we've got this great threat out there. It's an internal threat. It's these white supremacists, these crazy militia types, and we're seeing the same thing happen on a national, international level with these so-called terrorist events. They're just intentionally staged events with a direct purpose to give the government an excuse to implement martial law and take away our freedoms, period. And one thing that kind of falls right into that is the whole idea of food and your guns. There's an association there. Food is a great way to implement control. People get hungry. You might have to line up for a food ration. And it's just like I had the same experience. I went in one of the local clinics, and they get federal funding, and they start asking me if I own guns.
Right.
And where do I keep the guns in my house? I couldn't believe it.
Yes, the doctors are, if I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to anyway. The doctors right now, I just talked to my physician earlier, or last week it was, and he said federal forms now under Obamacare, they're all asking about gun ownership and if you're inclined to use them, anger issues and such. And they are reporting this to the feds, the federal government.
Right. I mean, if you think that it couldn't happen here, hello, folks. Well, I'll tell you, if there's ever any shortages and they start having to ration food, you're not going to get your ration card if they got you on a list that you own a gun. And the stories of what they did down in Katrina, kicked doors in, knocked people down, took their guns away without any provocation. Old ladies knocked them down, jumped on them, took handguns away from them. Just people who were trying to defend their property. So what I'm saying is there is a relation between food and freedom and food and holding on to your Second Amendment rights. If you've got to get in that line to get a ration ticket for your family, you're probably going to have to give up your guns.
That's exactly, and my DHS source said exactly that. Steve, you remember we talked about this by, you're hungry, you go. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to the refugee centers, basically FEMA camps, to get your food. They intend to starve us.
Right, starve into submission and kill the rest. You know, I don't know how plain it can be. What Phil is absolutely saying, look, you're not going to be able to keep your food unless you can keep your mouth shut. And then the number one rule I want to give everybody who's a prepper now is, even, you know, if you watch the Doomsday Prepper show, you've got to understand that every single one of those people has made a tactical error if they've shown their face. People equate that. Now, look, here's the deal. You have to have a secondary or even a tertiary, I mean a third place, to have at least your supplies cached. Some people say cached, C-A-C-H-E-D. Some people say cachet. I believe it is a French term. The correct word is cached, meaning placed, hidden away. It's what a lot of the Green Berets learned they had to do if they were going on an operation for a couple weeks into one of the surrounding countries, Laos or Cambodia. They had to basically have their provisions in place ahead of time, so they would have something to eat. And most people, I think, have, if you will, too much of a final attitude that, well, I'm just going to hold my fixed position. If you are going to hold a fixed position, let me give you another rule of practical prepping. Do not be in the fixed position. Be in an ambush spot with plenty of cover, so when they come, you at least have a chance, okay? Let's say this. Let me give you a good example. You guys, I don't know if everybody knows what an Apache fire pit is, and they go by different names. Viet Cong had them just basically not only tunnels, but you have holes in the ground, and you basically have a top, and when people are coming in to attack, let's say, the front of your door, you're behind them, and you attack them. Well, there are basic, fighting technologies and stuff out there, but here's the point I want to make for everyone. I am praying, and I have for 20 years on talk radio, that God is going to give an event that will be if you will, an event horizon that you'll have 14 days. At that point, you've got to have considered, do you have a relative that maybe you can go and see? If you're on the East Coast, can you rent a little cottage in the Poconos or upstate New York or Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire? Can you do that? Because, again, you've got to understand the key is what Phil is saying. You cannot tactically take on a tank with an SKS. The other thing that I think people need to understand is that a secondary location must be pre-provisioned. I'm going to give some statements that, Doug, I think will make it easy for people to understand. It's a whole lot easier, as Phil says, if you got to run for it, to run to your stuff than trying to run with your stuff. Obviously, special forces and special operations of all kind, when they're being attacked by a superior force or a counter-guerrilla movement, or there's multiple people going after them, they teach their guys to dump their stuff and to run with the minimum amount, because obviously weight will slow them down. So if you pre-position in multiple locations and obviously don't lose track of the locations, then you've got at least that as enough. Because let's say this, even if you were to be placed on a train, a prison train, and it got ambushed by freedom fighters or whatever, and you got to run for your life, it's always easier to know that, hey, I got 20 miles away or 50 miles away or whatever, I've got something to go to or something to go, a place to hide. Look, you can hide in a lot of different areas. The Air Force teaches their pilots, a survival, escape, and evasion, And so the thing is that with the technology that's out there, that becomes more difficult. But I will tell you there are people who are still capable. Listen, a genius is still a genius. If he retires, doesn't make him less of a genius. There are still people who develop the very systems that know how to mess up the systems. And my prayer is that God will raise those men and women up. And when the time comes, some of them have said, we can play in their court too. In other words, they know how to play back. So, Doug, I don't know if you're going to break the story tonight on, what your DHS source told you, but it is safe to say, is it not, based on our conversation, that they marvel at how stupid the American people are, that they don't see what's going on, even with, quote, the Obama phone giveaway?
Yeah, we'll do that tonight, Steve. And we're up against the top of the hour break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Hagman and the Hagman Reports. our very special guest, Mr. Steve Quayle and Mr. Philip Hogue. And I want to thank both these gentlemen for joining us tonight. We're going to be back after these 3-minute messages. Stay with us.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday, October 1st, 2012. This very special first day of October, joined by very special guests Philip Hogue and Steve Quayle. Tonight we were talking about practical and tactical preparedness measures we can take, both whether it be water, food, any kind of necessities we need. And Mr. Hogue, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back here.
Perfect. Excellent.
I guess
and
it's my turn to talk here for a minute.
Well, sure.
Listen, a lot of good points came up. I think the one thing I'd like to reinforce is there's some very obvious and basic practical things that you can do. And the first is, if you live in a major city and you're seriously concerned about the future, you shouldn't be there. Now, I know that's hard for people that have got their whole life pivoting around, living in a major metropolitan area, but, you know, your vulnerability is so compounded living in an area of high population density.
We've had concerns and questions from people who say they live in inner cities, and what are their options? They don't have the money to flee. They hardly have the money to prepare food. And, you know, we can always say family, friends. Hopefully there's people that they can reach out to. But for those who can't, maybe people left alone, people without any family left.
Yeah, Phil, if you can speak to the people in urban areas, in the cities, living in apartments, what do they do?
Well, actually, wherever you live, one of your biggest and most important assets is your sense of community. And so whether you're in the inner city or you're in rural Montana, you need to develop a community network. And no matter whether it's an issue of security, whether it's an issue of food, whether it's an issue of medical needs, there is no one person who is the ultimate superhuman that has every answer to every problem. The beauty about us as humans is we all have individual God-given talents or points of genius, whether it's being an auto mechanic or whether it's being someone who is good with medical issues or someone who's good at making food or someone that's good at scrounging things up. We all have individual talents, and if we can learn to work as a group, as a team, we can get an exponential amplification of results. That's what happens when you can work in community effectively.
That is excellent advice, and I say that because you know, one neighborhood with if you have enough food for yourself and others to be able to help, if you have a whole neighborhood of people who are prepared with enough food for themselves and their families and the people around them, there will be less focus on where we're going to get our next meal and more focus on how can we, you know, get back to a normal state of living.
Well, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you live wherever you live, develop a core group of people, like a doctor for your medical needs, somebody who's good at fishing, somebody who's good at procuring, the food, someone's good at security, that type of thing, right?
Right, and like, I'll give you an example. I live in the Paradise Valley here, and when I moved here, it was 30 years ago or so, I was out burning off a field, and the wind shifted and started a huge fire. And I called the fire department, they never came, and I had about 50 neighbors out there trying to help me deal with the fire. But so I decided maybe I should get involved in the fire department. So I got involved in it, and eventually became the fire chief and started the first tax-based fire department, started the ambulance service and whatnot. So I'm really involved in community here. But getting back to the point, there's one thing about disasters. It can do two things. One, it can bring the worst out of people, but in general, it brings the best out of people. People tend to pull together. People tend to give of themselves in ways that they normally don't in day-to-day life. And so, there's a silver lining to a lot of these dark clouds that we see in front of us. It's kind of an interesting document that I really think everybody should read. And if you read this document, you will fully understand everything that's going on. Everything, whether it's national politics or international politics. And it's called A Report from Iron Mountain. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but you can go on the Internet and do a research on it. You'll find it in numerous places. It was generated by the Rand Corporation back in 1966. And if you seriously read this report, there's no question that this was a high-level report. It's a fairly long report, but it is so profound because it goes into human psychology. And the essence of what they say in the report from Iron Mountain is it's an analysis of human psychology and human herd instinct. And it's for high-level government officials. And the one thing they go into is that in order to have political identity, in order to have a sense of community, you need an external threat. You need war. And this report goes into, this is instructional material for government officials of why they need war. War stimulates the economy. War creates cohesive political elements in society. War pulls people together. War heals economic issues, and especially today when we look at the collapse of this fiat currency, the only way they can hold it together and the only way they can pull it out of this financial pit is they need war. And you start seeing what they're doing around the world. I mean, it's just crazy. It's like what happened with Nazi Germany. It's bomb, torture, and plunder. So getting back to something more positive in the community, in the sense of community, the other aspect to it is all of us have blind spots. We all have points of genius, but we all have our equal and opposite blind spots, things that we don't see. If you can learn to work together with other people, then other people can nullify or neutralize your blind spots. And I've seen this over and over when you see authoritarian structures, all right, whether it's in churches or corporations or whatnot. They work beautifully on the aspect of the person at the top, when you've got a top-down structure, on their point of genius. But what usually undermines the organization is that person's blind spot, their backside. Now, if you can get a team structure, you can neutralize each other's blind spots. So always beware of if you get into community-type situation, stay away from the guy who represents himself as the all-knowing, God-gifted hero that's going to take care of everybody. You need to work in a community base. You need to have a team operation. You need to get people to bring their talents together and neutralize each other's blind spots. But so the number one, I want to really encourage people, look up this report from Iron Mountain, read it, and then you'll understand what's going on. Another thing that I would really recommend people look up if they like to read books, there's a book called Fugitives of the Forest. And you remember that movie that went through that they didn't give much space on the movie theaters, Defiance?
Yeah.
Well, this book is the true story of where they built that, where they got the material to make that movie from. And it's just a fascinating book. And it may have, I really believe it has direct lessons that are applicable to what some of the things we may have to deal with in the future. And this is about the story of the Jews in Eastern Europe who were out there on the Russian-German front, who fled from the ghettos and the places where the Nazis had them all concentrated, and went out in the forest and engaged in resistance. And, I mean, this isn't theory. This is actual history. So this book is just fascinating because you can see what they actually went through when they had to live out in the forest in the winter and try and survive and try and evade and escape. And it's a really good book, and I recommend people, you can find it on the Internet. You can go into Amazon. It's called Fugitives of the Forest, and it was written by a guy named Alan Levine, Levine. It's got so much practical information that you can translate into this day and age, into your preparations. Anyhow, I won't say any more on that. Getting back to food, it's another issue that Steve and I have tried to address. You know, back in Y2K, both Steve and I were both in the food business, and it was a big kind of boom and bust, you know. And when the bust came, it was like after Y2K didn't happen, there was just tons of food, and you couldn't even give it away. And so consequently, both Steve and myself ended up with huge stockpiles of food that we had in our storage complexes, you know. And one of the lessons I learned is when I look back, I think about what did I actually eat out of that food that was there, you know, because we used to sell these packages that were loaded up with TVP and beans and heavy with whole wheat and whatnot. And, you know, both Steve and I have come to the realization we're both allergic to wheat. And I've got thousands of pounds of it down there. And so what we tried to do when we got into the food business again was to reestablish and to reevaluate what we did in the past and to try and be more realistic to actually produce food or offer food that people could really use. Plus, like a lot of the people are out there still today, a lot of the companies are selling long-term food storage, and they're still putting this soy-based TVP in their packages as an alternative to, you know, real meat. And what I figured out is I tried feeding that stuff to my chickens, and they wouldn't even eat it. So that's a lesson.
Yeah, you know that's bad.
Yeah. Well, you know, so you've actually really refined everything after the Y2K. So really the position we're in right now, I mean, this is good. We learned lessons from Y2K, right? I mean, that's how we should look at it.
Well, I think that. Yeah. Hey, Phil, let me just say one thing, and I'll turn it right back to you.
Go for it.
I think what Phil is saying is that in addressing, there's calories and then there's good food. And unfortunately, a lot of the early food storage programs were basically beans and rice, dehydrated vegetables, bread and roll mixes, and basically granola or variations of cereal and drink mixes. So when Phil got hooked up with the Canadians that I had sold all my equipment to in the old days of Safe Trek Foods, and they asked me to come on and help market this stuff, I said with one caveat, and I said we're going to do it right this time. Not that we did it wrong last time, but we're going to give people real food that they can eat with real meat, real butter, real cheese, real fruit, and basically radiation-proof seafood, which we're the only company that I know of right now in the food business that actually checks all our seafood with a high dollar radiation dosimeter. So real quickly, the idea was to give people more food, edible food, for their dollars spent, because look, in my food storage, I want real meat. I'm a meat eater. I'm not a vegetarian. My blood type demands meat. I also know this, that obviously the man who can eat is not at the mercy of the men who basically are trying to force you into a controlled diet, limiting your caloric intake and limiting your mental prowess. So when Phil got hooked up with the Canadian guys, Milton Ted, they asked me to come in and I think this is, Phil, a great point to introduce this, because the point is we said, yeah, but we want to do real food with real food packages that people will eat, because especially children cannot eat beans and rice unless they're used to eating it, and there's a lot of people that can't even digest beans. Phil already said he's gluten intolerant. I'm totally gluten intolerant, and so, it doesn't do any good to have 4,000 pounds of wheat, a wheat grinder, and most people don't even know who have gluten intolerance that they have it unless they're test for it. So, saying all that, what Dry Harvest then did was go out and put out real food at real calories and more calories, not empty calories. Like, you can get calories out of sugar, but it's no good for you. It attacks your immune system. But the point is that I think that, and Phil's the one that put the package together, I think that there's nothing like it. Look, I'm one of the oldest guys in the survival business, Doug. I mean, I was one of the very first Mountain House, I'm not bragging, just stating a fact, and one of the first Alpine Air distributors in the country. Dennis Korn, who started the company, Alpine Air Foods, was a friend of mine. It still is. So the point I'm trying to make is that food is everything. I can tell you this, if you don't think food's important, I can directly relate the entire Middle East to a certain individual selling his birthright to another individual, and both being, let's just say this, one recognized what a blessing from God was all about, and that's what we're trying to get people to understand. People have life insurance policies, they have annuities, they have all this stuff, but you know what? They couldn't last 30, 60, 90 days on the food that's in their pantry, because we're all victims. If you think this is crazy, try it. Don't go to the store for 2 weeks, or let's even shorten it to 1 week, and eat what you have in your refrigerator, eat what you have in your pantry, and guess what? You're going to find out that even the stuff you have in your pantry and the stuff you have in your fridge, outside of the obvious stuff, most people go and buy fresh food, and they leave the frozen stuff in the fridge or the freezer, frozen stuff in the freezer for a lot of years. So what I'm saying is, if you think that you got this thing nailed, you can have a multi-million-dollar portfolio. I know people like that. I have clients like that. And they can't last 30 days on the food that's in there. And some people think, well, their money will deliver them. No, it won't, because, and this is something we got to talk about in this show, barter is what is going to be the order of the day. And barter, and let me explain, and I think this is critical people understand this. I did not hear John B. Wells' show, but somebody told me that on Coast to Coast, guys were saying, because there's going to be a new monetary system, you won't be able to trade or barter your silver or gold. First of all, 6,000 years says they're wrong. Second of all, the bottom line is, in the rest of the world where you or I or some of us may end up, you can still eat on an ounce of gold most places for 3 months, if not 6 months, and eat as many calories and as good. You go to Argentina and you can eat for $8.50, and I'm not saying everybody should run to Argentina to get a steak dinner, but the point being is that there are people that don't understand gold and silver, don't understand barter, and making stupid statements. Now, I did not hear it, but it's a stupid statement, because they're automatically assuming that everyone is going to willingly transition into the New World Order's new global plex of the financial instruments that they come up with. Well, guess what? The Americans are going to be contested by the Chinese and Russians already are. The different factions within the Illuminati are going to fight, because it's not enough to have everything. You got to have everybody else's everything. So the point is that barter will be the way of the means. If I want to buy some chickens or some goat milk from Phil, he's going to trade me an ounce of silver for a couple dozen eggs or whatever. So, ladies and gentlemen, ask yourself this. if somebody makes an outlandish claim, or what's somebody willing to pay for, and I'm not condoning this, but if somebody needs to buy whatever their habit is, and somebody's got whatever their habit is, then they're going to pay in something that's universally recognized. If the United States dollar crashes tomorrow, if we go under martial law, silver and gold will still have international value, and the people listening to shortwave will still know that an ounce of silver at that point is worth $100, and an ounce of gold is worth $3,000. So, Phil, by the way, Phil can be reached at Dry Harvest, and Phil, I don't know, the number off the top of my head, but if you want to give it out, and I also want to make this, Phil gets paid big bucks, you guys, from traveling all over the world to assist and advise people and governments on auxiliary power plants, shelters, etc. So the point is that he makes his living as a consultant. So he agreed to come on tonight and share this stuff because, again, people, he's serious about community. By the way, I've seen Phil literally standing in the middle of the highway and some of the most gruesome accidents. And, I mean, the guy is and I'm not, just because he's my friend, I've literally watched him under some of the highest stress stuff, and I've just said under my breath or out loud, thank God it's him and not me, because some of the stuff, the blood, the gore, the guts, and the stuff he deals with, God's given him a gift in this, but he also knows how to build a shelter. Most of you are seeing on the prepper shows on TV, the shelters right now to build one. I don't know if any of us can say what the timing is for sure, but you can build an expedient shelter. You can, for instance, block out all the glass windows with black, non-visible fabric or paper. You can get a 3M bulletproof film that you can put on your windows. Let's say you've got a picture window, and you can put it on and enough layers that someone can throw a baseball bat, they can shoot at it depending on the ballistic level. And when you make it tough for someone to get into your area or to get at you, they typically go next door. That won't be true of foreign UN troops. But see, it's kind of like, Doug, we got to be considering everything because, again, at this point, it's everything that we've known as comforting and as, basically available to us. The comfort leaves and the availability diminishes rapidly. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, and Phil, I want you, if you would, just to take a few minutes and address Dry Harvest because, look, we both, when we talked about the need for real food and real calorie counts, said there's nothing out there. And do you want to address that? Because you're the guy setting up the packages, and you know exactly on a given day what's available and what isn't.
Yeah, Steve, like I say, a lot of what I designed into the packages we offer has to do with looking back over at these tons of food I had and what I actually used that was in there. I found that I used the pancake mix, I used the rice, I used the oatmeal, I used the olive oil, and I used the honey, and that was about it. I just didn't get into much of the other stuff. So we tried to really put a package together that potentially, if nothing happened, that people would still be content to use the stuff and eat it so, instead of it going out to feed the chickens. So anyhow, if you're interested in any of that, you can visit our website, which is www.dryharvest.com, and that's spelled DRI-HARVEST foods.com. That's DRI-harvestfoods.com. And if you want a phone number, you can call us on 406-223-4555. That's 406-223-4555. And
I think there's a direct link right off of stevequayle.com. If you go to stevequayle.com at the bottom, right there, just click the link to Dry Harvest, and you are there. Because look, Phil, I got to tell you something. When everything hits the fan, the last thing I want to do is really eat something I don't want to eat. Okay, I mean, comfort. People talk about comfort food. The psychological stressors are going to be bad enough. I don't want bad food or something that tastes like wallpaper paste. You know what I mean? So what you're saying is what you're offering right now is basically a redefined, repackaged product based on your experience that people are going to eat, okay, and can eat and will eat, even if nothing happens. Because I don't want a whole bunch of stuff in the pantry.
And Steve started to bring up that whole issue of children, which I think is very important. There's a thing called appetite fatigue that is a real serious problem with some children, that they will starve before they will eat food that they're not used to, you know. And I know I had one son that was a picky eater, and they usually grow out of it, but it's particularly a serious problem with children. So, you know, it's something to look into. Your food storage is your buffer. Your food storage is a thing that gives you the opportunity to adapt. Ideally, we're looking at radical change. In this book, Fugitives in the Forest, it's an example of people that went through a radical change. These people were lawyers. These people were university professors. Some of these people were filthy rich. Some of them were not. All of a sudden, things turned upside down. The people that were at the top of the heap ended up at the bottom. The people that, when things got bad, that were on the top were the Jewish farmers, the guys that knew how to work in the woods, the guys that could shoot a gun. In fact, that was one of the key things in their social structure. Is the person that was most important was the one who owned a gun and could participate in defense. He was the highest level of the echelon, and the people that were the rich bankers and lawyers and professors, the people that used to be at the top, they were at the very bottom. You know, they were the most expendable. So, ideally, the one problem with food storage programs is they don't replenish themselves. Buckets don't refill themselves when they get empty. Cans don't refill themselves when they get empty. And this goes back to what I said earlier. We've got the people that are going to do the best are the people that are living in an Amish community or in the third world. Because we have lost skills. When I was a kid, my parents all had gardens. They would have a garden every year. They would do canning. Many of them were very attuned to animal husbandry. But the average person out there doesn't have a clue. They're so distanced from it. And a lot of them have this idea, well, they've got back copies of Mother Earth News, and they'll just pull those out, and it'll be like instant soup that you just add water and heat, and all of a sudden there's going to be this great copiance of this garden that produces more food than they could even imagine out of their emergency seed kit. Well, it just doesn't happen that way. You know, I've been trying to learn for years. I've got goats, I have a garden, I have a greenhouse. You know, I've had sheep. It takes years to perfect some of these skills, especially when you're trying to earn a living on the side too. But really seriously look at your situation and what's best for your family and how you can adapt into a situation if you've got radical change. You know, somewhere where you can have chickens, where you can have a couple of goats, where you can raise a pig, you know, where you can have a garden, you know, where you can hunt. So start thinking about these. If you have the capability to transition into any of this stuff or toward it, you know, now's the time. Now's the time to take practical steps to start where you are and have the belief that there is a plan. You know, if you're doing your best, then life's going to take care of you. They're going to, one way or another, they're going to, you know, things are going to move forward. And, you know, these situations of radical change, this is not the first time in human history that it's happened. If we look back at in the days of the time of the Roman Empire and Jesus, We had a situation there where we had a collapse of the Roman Empire. And that disorder and that stress that was put on the people back then, it was one of the key elements to the expansion of the Christian church, because people were forced to give up their material aspirations. They were forced to look within for something deeper, just due to the stress of the collapse of the Roman Empire. And, it looked like a terrible thing, but it had a silver lining to it. And I really believe in my own life, when I was young and crazy and doing stupid things, life, God, or whatever you want to call it, came up to me with a 2x4 and whacked me over the head, to get my attention. And I think the same thing is happening to America today. Life is coming up with a big 2x4, and it's whacking the American people over the head. And I'm not saying it isn't going to be easy, but I do believe that we'll get through it.
Well, Doug, the other thing that I think people need to understand is this, is that the most important survival item of anyone is, in my opinion, and having written books on this, Phil's book, No Such Thing as Doomsday, is no longer in print right now. Neither is mine, Blueprint for Survival. But one of the things we laid out in those books is attitude, okay? And so those of you who are alone right now, I want to share something. Your attitude of prepping will obviously pay off in ways you don't yet see. One of the things that Phil, I don't know if you know this, Phil, but one of the problems is that there are how do I say this, people have to maintain a certain sense of anonymity for their protection, yet they want with all their heart to have like-minded people to sync up and link up to. And that's a difficulty that in 20 years on talk radio, and pretty close to 40 years actually 35 years in the survival business, the point being is that it's tough because, again, when you have people that have shared beliefs and they have the desire, when you understand, here's a great attitude, it's as important for me to keep the doctor alive as it is for the doctor to keep me alive. And the issue that is really before us is this, is that will it take, in my opinion, will it take something so drastic for people to come into a new form? And I coined a term years and years ago, wrote about it. I coined two terms, Doug. I coined neo, N-E-O, like new feudalism, okay? And I coined another word, basically, which was, and it wasn't my word, but I said you would see a neo-community or neo-tribalism arriving, and tribe only simply meaning we don't all run around with loincloths and, look like something out of a 20,000 BC movie, but we basically would find common bonds, and it's just like the clans of Scotland. It's like the different tribes that are around the world. Obviously, God in His graciousness is going to bring His people together, and He's going to take them out of the wolves' mouths. But right now, there seems to be there are more wolves than sheep, and the sheep are hiding out because they need to, or else they'd be, dinned in for the wolves. So saying all that, I'm not trying to be obtuse. What I'm saying is that probably the greatest amount of emails I receive after requesting specific advice is to how do I find like-minded people? Well, the like-minded people will be shopping for the same things you're shopping for. Like-minded people will be reading the same types of books you're looking at. So you've got to be observant. So that's the OODA, O-O-D-A loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. And so once you know that, that let's say you've observed somebody, they're doing the right thing. Obviously, you see people that are prepping. The thing is that that's where, and I believe this is key, I believe that's where discerning of spirits and praying, because again, having chosen the wrong friends so many times out of my life, it's only when God said, if you'll trust me, Steve, I'll give you better friends than you choose for yourself. I now allow God to choose my friends. And it's interesting because people who are real will manifest themselves real. If someone asks too many questions, Phil addressed that earlier in the show, they haven't done anything to prepare. And I want to be blunt. If someone can't rub two nickels together, why would you listen to their opinion on any of these bulletin boards about what they think about silver and gold? It's irrelevant. It's amazing to me. Or if someone has never, we live in the realm of too many people saying, I think. It's what do they know? For instance, when we talk, and maybe this is a good time to broach the subject, but the point is that people, you are coming into the most violent period in history. And Doug, do you feel free? And if you don't, because I don't want to put you on the spot or lead you into any place that would get anybody in trouble. But do you feel free to address the cell phone issue and how that's going to become everybody's problem very soon?
Yeah, Steve, I'll be glad to do that. And ladies and gentlemen,
now, in doing so, are you going to be able to protect your you won't get anybody in trouble, right?
That's right. And
okay. Because I don't want to lead you into this, but I think it's critical for people to understand that while they're still trying to decide if it's okay for Christians to defend themselves as Christians, there's a whole bunch of people out there just waiting to whack the Christians. I mean, murder, slaughter, kill. So would you please address that if you feel it's the right time? I think it is.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was struggling with this, Steve, as you know today, how to put this into to articulate this into a word like an alert or an article or anyway. Having talked with my source inside the Department of Homeland Security, who has seen some things of late. Look, the Obama phone program, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard that. You know, we all laughed at that woman, that video of that woman saying, "Oh, I got my Obama phone, vote for Obama. Romney sucks," I think she said, and and it was almost like a parody, like a Saturday Night Live skit. People laughed at that, and they said, "Look at that. How pathetic is that?" You know, the people inside DHS are laughing at us for laughing at her, and here's why. Those phones, this $1.6 billion program or whatever it is, federal program, those phones are the key to communicate for Obama / the Napolitano DHS to communicate with the minorities for the bottom line, to foment social, racial chaos. That's what the intent is. You think it's, hey, we're going to give everyone a phone because everyone can dial 911. No, that's not the case. And if you think about it, it's the evil is in its simplicity. It's totally evil. But that is,
hey, Doug,
in fact,
Doug,
yes, sir.
you might check, Doug, I don't mean to interrupt you, but two people said we just got knocked off the air. Can you even switch? I don't know if we're up or down, but
okay, stand by.
People have to refresh. Typing it into the chat room, they say they lost sound. Some people are getting it back. If anybody can hear me, you just refresh. If you can't hear me, type it into the chat rooms to let other people know. Just refresh the player, and it should go back and work. They can hear us now in the chat.
Yeah, everything is fine, Steve.
Okay. I'm sorry, it's just that because this is so critical.
Yeah, okay. And I'm pretty sure that the archive will show, it will come across the whole thing was picked up. So
but let me just very quickly repeat that. The Obama.
Please do it, Doug.
Okay, the Obama phone program. For those of you who did not get that, look, people understand this. Do you think? Well, I was told by my source within the Department of Homeland Security that this Obama phone program is not for to help the minorities out so they can call 911 in an emergency. Those people who maintain their phones, and look, they understand that a certain percentage of those phones, they call them crack phones. Okay, so a certain percentage of those phones are going to be sold off for whatever, especially the newer ones. But the issue here is this: that federal subsidized phone program is in place so the presidents, if you will, Obama, his people, Napolitano, whoever, can communicate directly. Now, obviously, they're not going to say, hey, go out and riot. But, it would, and think about this. During the elections, for example, wouldn't it be something for an update by Obama or the office of Obama to say, hey, guess what? We won the presidency, but Romney stole it. Okay, what do you think that would happen? what do you think would happen with that message? It would look like somebody's sports team lost, and you'd see burning and looting, burning of cars and looting. That is what these phones are for. It's not because the government loves you and wants to help you. They're not here to help you in this case. They're here to exploit that known racial and societal divide. It's important to understand that. It's very evil in its simplicity. So I just want to get that across. And Steve, it really, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful plan, isn't it?
It's brilliant, and I think that what people need to understand where this comes into play, because if I'm not mistaken, Doug, you told me that these were expendables. The word expendable, or we won't use the other word, but what it basically means. And by the way, people are saying to me, again, this is people in your chat room, everyone on comment boards says sound is down. So, hey, Joe, you might want to take, they say they're continually being cut off. That means somebody's messing with the information we're trying to give out.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat room and what people are saying, and as we've experienced this before, we are sure that this comes through all on the archive. So anybody who got cut off, hopefully is back on, and if not, can rewind to the archives. As soon as the show's over, the archive should be up.
And folks, disable your screensavers if you can, or at least put them on hold for the show. That'll knock you off. Sometimes if you've got multiple programs running, that also strains your computer. But
and I got to say, Blog Talk Radio, has a lot of problems recently. We've been noticing when we have, honorable guests come on.
I'll say this:
we've been attacked.
Right, but we are broadcasting on two platforms. Okay, one overseas, one domestically. Look, the word's getting out. So okay, let's. Steve, go ahead. Let's. So I mean, we're being set up here, obviously, by our own government. But
I think part of the problem is just what you said. It's not our own government, and that's the illusion. They're masquerading as a government of, by, and for the people, and it's just not there anymore. And it hasn't been for a long time. It's just that the illusion is starting to fall away. They can't maintain the illusion of this being our government. It is not our government, and just what we're seeing here in the election, our choice between Obama and Romney. I mean, I don't think the elite really care which one wins. And quite frankly, the agenda probably won't change at all either. It might accelerate a little faster under Obama, but they laugh at us fighting over, whether it's going to be Democrat or Republican. Both of those guys are getting money from the elite, from Goldman Sachs. I mean, and neither of them will touch any of the real issues. It's all an argument about who's going to do a better job fighting the international wars, and who's going to spend more money and drive our grandchildren into slavery. So anyhow, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'll be quiet.
Phil, you make a good point, because that was the other thing that was said. It matters not. I mean, the plans are the same. People might change, but it does not matter. It's all theater. It's like it's that professional wrestling stuff. This is a diversion, what we're seeing right now. And, Obama will advance the Islamist agenda in addition to the New World Order type of agenda. But both of them, look, we're heading off a cliff in fifth gear right now. Does it really matter if we're going 70 miles an hour with Obama or 65 with Romney? We're still heading for the same cliff. Which, by the way, Steve and Phil, I don't know if you want to address this. We've got a lot of questions about. There are two main areas people are really concerned about. I've been getting barraged by emails and what have you. One is what to do about money in banks right now, and the second thing is power. Okay, so Phil,
let's let you do the power, and I'll do the money, because I just got an email in, Doug, that I think will basically suffice. I want to make it clear that, again, the power issue is going to be everything. Without power, it's obvious. You can use the metaphor, we go back to the Dark Ages, but there are different ways to address it. Phil, will you address the power issue both from, solar, wind, and generator, obviously fuel types, that kind of stuff, because that's what you do, or incorporate all of the above?
Sure. Well, let's see. Let's talk about power. Power can be done on many different levels. It can be just as simple as having a Home Depot gas-powered generator that you go out there and put some gas in and pull the handle and run some extension cords in the house, or it can develop into something a little more sophisticated. Basically, when we look at independent power systems, we're talking about a system that is composed of a power source or multiple power sources. That could be a generator, that could be solar panels, that could be a wind tower, tied into an inverter and a charge controller and a battery bank. A lot of people are so addicted, like they are to the grocery stores, they're very addicted to plugging into that outlet and using the power off the grid in such a way that, they assume that, if they've got their battery bank and they've got a solar panel and a wind generator out there, that they'll just be able to plug in and do whatever they want, whenever they want. Well, that's not really the way the system works unless you're throwing mega bucks into it. When you go into an independent power system, you're looking at changing your lifestyle a little bit. You're looking at scheduling loads. You're looking at not doing everything at the same time. You're looking at being very much economical in your use of energy and power. And there's a lot of things that are very difficult and really hard to do on a standalone independent power system. So basically what we've got when we're plugging into the grid, we've got an AC system, we've got alternating current. And you really can't store alternating current. In order to store electricity, you've got to convert it from AC into DC. And that's basically what we do in an automobile. It's a DC system where we can store electricity in the battery. Now, batteries are kind of the heart of any independent power system. The whole battery technology really hasn't changed a whole lot in 80 years. We have had some new improvements that have come across. The first one was what they called the Advanced Glass Mat Battery. It's called an AGM battery. And if you look around, you can find multiple people or companies that produce these batteries. And they're far superior to what you call the standard lead-acid battery, in that a lead-acid battery has a self-discharge rate of about 25% per month if you just let those batteries set. And that's one of the biggest problems with these independent power systems with these preppers, is they'll spend a couple $1,000, $3,000, $4,000 on a nice lead-acid battery bank, and then they won't use it for 6 months, and the thing will go flat and the plates will sulfate, and it's ruined. And I've seen so many batteries thrown out. That's one of the beauties of these new AGM batteries, because they have virtually no self-discharge. The other beauty about them is they will operate down to about 30 below zero. Now, where the regular lead-acid battery, as the temperature gets colder, the chemical reaction slows down. And so in an independent hybrid power system, what you're doing is you're getting power either from a generator, which could be in the form of AC power, and it's going into what's called an inverter. And the inverter changes the AC into DC and charges batteries, or it takes, when the generator is not on, it takes the power, the DC power, out of the battery and then converts it into alternating current so you can use it for your AC appliances. In the same token, that inverter charger can take input from DC current sources like solar panels and wind towers, and it can regulate and control the charging on your batteries. There's Outback is one of the big companies out there right now. There's in every major city there's companies, and there's companies around the country that specialize in helping you set up these independent power systems. It's a good thing to look into, and if you have the money to put it in that direction, you can do that. Now, you can get very basic. You might not be able to... I'm sorry, did you say something?
Phil, let's talk basic if we can. Like, for example, I get a lot of emails for tonight's program saying, look, I got a family of 2 kids, my wife and me, live in a house, live in an urban area or suburbs. What do I do in case the power goes out for a long period of time? Do I get a generator? Do I get a propane generator? Do I get a natural gas generator? Do I get a diesel generator? What do I do?
The natural gas generators, it's a nice idea, but I would, if it was me, I would go toward propane or a dual fuel generator that can, by a switch, can either run off the natural gas and or a propane tank. The reason being is we may lose natural gas pressure in some sorts of disasters. And so the other thing is to seriously look at the option of a diesel generator. Diesel generator is going to be a little bit more expensive, but diesel is a fairly stable fuel, and it's got a lot of energy in it. And you can get a pretty good bang for your buck in terms of the amount of fuel you've got stored and the power that you get out of it. A lot of people get under kind of an illusion, well, I've got a little 200-gallon propane tank out there, and I'm going to stick a 15 kW propane generator out here, and we'll live happily ever after. Well, if you're going to put a 15 kW propane generator out there, you better have yourself a 1,000-gallon tank, because that propane's liable to disappear really quick on you. But on a very basic level, maybe going out and buying yourself a couple of AGM batteries so you can jimmy rig some basic DC lighting and run some radios off it, just to give you some basic ideas. You can always, if you got some gas left in your vehicle, you can charge the battery off your vehicle. If you get to a little higher level, you can look at getting some solar panels trickle charge and keep the battery charge up on your battery system. But again, if you're going to do something like that ahead of time, spend a few extra bucks and get an AGM battery, because just getting a standard deep cycle or even marine lead-acid battery, unless you keep you've got a really good intelligent charge controller on it all the time, you're liable to be throwing your money away if the battery ends up going flat on you. But there's a lot of parallels with the RV industry. If you want to get into a very basic system, go down to your local RV shop and look at the systems they've got in those RVs and adapt some of that into your little survival area, whether it's an underground shelter or whether it's in your house. You don't have to recreate the square wheel. They're already doing this in the RV industry.
All right, gentlemen, we're up against the top of the hour break. When we come back, Steve, if you want to take that monetary issue, I'd love that. We'd love that.
Because I have some really important news, and again, I want to put everyone in perspective when we come back. V told us that Goldman Sachs lost $100 billion. People mocked him, mocked me, and guess what? $100 billion. No, I'm sorry, not million. $100 billion, and the stories that are coming into me, Doug, are going to be pretty telling and compelling. So when we come back, I'll attack this, and I'll also attack from the standpoint of barter. The number one question I've been asked all these years, how do you decide barter value? You don't have to decide. It's already decided on a worldly basis. We'll be right back, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Report. SteveQuayle.com. From there, you can access Philip Hoag's website. That's SteveQuayle.com. And then Philip Hoag with Dry Harvest. Folks, we're right back after this.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday, October 1st edition of the Hagmann Report. We've made it through 2 hours now into the third hour of this very special show with Mr. Steve Quayle and Philip Hoag on tactical preparedness
and practical preparedness.
Yes.
And folks, go to SteveQuayle.com. That's SteveQuayle.com. From there, Dry Harvest, you can access Philip Hoag's website. And folks, if the name Philip Hoag sounds familiar, Art Bell had him on numerous times during his radio tenure. And we are privileged to have them both fine gentlemen on with us. Steve and Phil, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Doug. And I want to get into this financial thing. By the way, I'm getting emails. The sales manager for Dry Harvest is Eric, and for people that are emailing me, you can call him. I'll give this number slowly, 406-223-4555. Again, 406-223-4555. Eric, the sales manager for Dry Harvest, knowledgeable guy. He's one of those guys that can fix anything, make anything, do anything, and is a guy that has more than decades understanding the preparedness business. So you're not talking to somebody that doesn't walk the walk and talk the talk. I want to talk about the financial market because, Doug, I did send you my sources information. I want to put this into perspective. This is up to the date. I think it's up as an alert on my website, or will be tomorrow, but I'll read it on your show. Unsolicited. Again, my calling, I believe in the Lord, is to be a watchman and warn. When and for the record, Doug, there will be no more updates from V. His office was ransacked. His family was threatened. So, when I get and you're going to appreciate this, Phil, when I get the poultry-dropping, chicken-poop people that are saying, well, if he was real, you'd tell us his real name. No, I wouldn't, because you're not willing to pay the price with your life, and I'm not going to have some brother of mine in the Lord, he's not my physical brother, meeting his untimely demise, but he was the one that told us $100 to $150 billion is what Goldman Sachs lost, and that was, not Goldman Sachs, forgive me, he was talking about the loss of Morgan, and no one believed him, and the bottom line is, first of all, the official spokesman came out and said, it was only $10 billion, then it was $15 billion. Now it's $100 to $150 billion. The big numbers have lost their relevancy, but people better understand this. No one talked about, and I mean no one talked about the orchestrated cyber attack on the banking institutions of this country more so than V and I did it prior to V. I'm only putting this into perspective. God has given warning after warning after warning, and you're telling me, Doug, you're still getting emails from people asking what they should do with their money. Here's an email, and I sent it to you, Doug, so you can validate that it was sent to you and the guy's name is in it, just because I don't need to hide it from you. Steve, my company's 3 largest accounts receivable balances are from the Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, and Chase Wells Fargo. In August, they did not pay us as much as they should have. In September, it's worse. I'm talking about low 8 digits in receivables and climbing. I don't think people understand that low 8 digits, Doug, that's in the, tens of millions of dollars, if not into the low hundreds of millions of dollars. Please pass this information along to Doug and Joe Hagmann. Doug talks about getting hundreds of emails. Thought you were more likely to catch this. It is a piece of the puzzle of the banking system cratering, and a big sign they have cash flow problems. God bless you and the Hagmanns, and I pray for you, and I'm a regular podcast listener of their show, and thank you, MK. So here's the deal. The deal is that the orchestrated or the apparent cyber attack is going to be used as a cover to raid people's bank accounts. Now, obviously, you've seen the stories, everybody, that after December 31st, the infamous FDIC insurance magically disappears and goes away. You are aware of that, correct, Doug and Joe?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, now, if you can put, let me give this, I'll put this into real terms. I'm so sick and tired of people telling me, well, I just trust God because I've got my money in stocks and bonds. Okay, you've got your money in artificial instruments that are basically an IOU, a promise to pay on a future projected earning in which the whole infrastructure around and surrounding that, outside of Apple, okay, or outside the oil companies, is collapsing. So when I get an email from someone in the banking world, and he's telling me, obviously he's not telling me who he works for, I don't want to know that, but B of A, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo can't pay their bills, then maybe some of you will understand why intermittent problems arise in the ATM machines and stuff. The point is that the West has been pillaged and plundered. And the PDAs, you know what that is? That's poor dumb Americans still don't understand that all of the money that has been invested has already been assigned or pledged in some form of a debt or as a collateral instrument, hence the word derivative. That derivative that has been derived from an IOU or an underlying debt has then been pledged, repledged, packaged, sold, and it's in the quadrillion. So, you know, the guys who don't like the word quadrillion, they say, well, now it's only 700 trillion. Well, you can move the decimal point any bloody place you want, and the bottom line is it's broke. Russia and China and other nations are calling America's bluff. The United States dollar is no longer going to be accepted as the sole reserve currency or for the settlement of oil prices. China's going to pull the big number very soon, and I told everybody this, and China's brilliant. I'm not a China basher. I'm not their fan, but I will tell you this. They've done what no other nation can do. They have acquired enough gold, and believe me, the official numbers are nothing compared to the great gold troves and the treasure of Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan, all the different Ming and Qing dynasties. I mean, we're talking fabulous amounts of gold. They're the only nation right now that could literally back the yuan or the renminbi, their currency goes by both those names, with gold or with a commodity base. The minute they do that, the American dollar dies. That's why years ago, Doug, when I started on talk radio, I said, watch, the West will make China the next credit card-dependent nation. They will build up the middle class in China while destroying the middle class in the United States and get everybody hooked on credit over there because it's a whole lot easier to make a whole lot more money charging 1.1 billion Chinese interests than charging sub 300 million Americans. So understand that money always moves in anticipation and prior to major events. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, not money. But the control of money is the control of all evil. It's basically how the Illuminati and Luciferians buy and traffic in men's souls. So the point is that now we're dealing with a situation where, and I'll say it one more time, and the Lord knows it's probably the 100th time, that people have got to recognize that the issue is a cyber attack that will be launched at some point in the future. And, Doug, I believe your DHS source validated that it will be the economic collapse that triggers martial law. Did he not, or did he not suggest that?
No, he came right out and said that that's what everyone is anticipating based on the current. It could change, but right now that's what they're looking at right as a trigger event. Yes.
So the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, you asked me what you should do. Okay, let me give it to you really simple. If you put $100,000 in a bank account and you could get 0.5%, okay, 0.5%, obviously you're going to make. You're going to make what? On 1%, you're going to make $1,000 in interest. So divide it by 12, and that's $80 a month or $85 a month. If you're going to divide it and get 0.5%, you make $500. Okay, put $100,000 in silver 2 months ago at $27, and today it's $35. That's $8, and so you're looking at a 30% rise in your value. So your 100's now worth 130. But, Doug, I'll tell you this. The toughest thing for me to fight, and I've got to say this, is to get people to understand paper money has no real value. What's that platinum package of food worth from Dry Harvest when no one can buy it? And I'll tell you what, both Phil and I have seen when people panic, they will spend as much money, and I don't know that I can say for myself, they'll spend as much money flying first class or getting the food to them overnight. If the food package was $8,000, they'll spend $8,000 to get it. Now, not everyone can afford to do that. But what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is the food supply is like a limited commodity. So that's why we're telling people, look, you need to understand this. When you have life assurance, you get to live to benefit from your choices. When you have life insurance, something has to bad happen, and the only thing that we can tell people right now in the financial markets is, look, you don't go in and threaten to kill a guy and his wife and his family and trash his office and rifle his files and let his friends know if he opens his mouth one more time he's dead. And I categorically, seriously, Doug, you know me well, but I get so furious when some guy goes and puts his life on the line just to have the dumb unto death skeptics or shills at Northcom saying, well, if he were really a real person, yeah, well, if you're a real person, you guys who are dancing to the Illuminati, Symphony of Death would know who your real handlers are. They're not the guys that come in with the 4 stars on their epaulets, okay? The point is that we are seeing the orchestrated collapse of the old world order. The old world order is national boundaries, national currency, this conglomerate goo, this goo and gumbo from the Black Lagoon. And the thing that's interesting is that people are still sending me emails saying, should I take out my IRA or my 401k? Someone says, well, you shouldn't mock them. No, I have stated over and over and over that what you can't touch, you don't own. Look,
that's right.
People have got to take personal responsibility. When it comes to a matter of survival, it's personal accountability. Water storage, sanitation, food, firearms. The point is people don't want to make decisions because they're uncomfortable, because they've lived on the public dole, as Phil suggested, or they're too uncertain of what they know. But the bottom line is, it's kind of like the old statement, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it seems to me that in the preparedness mindset, which has been kind of fringy, mocked and everything, look, I can tell you this, billionaires in Montana take all this stuff seriously. Billionaires who you would think would be the most liberal people, they said, hell, we own the politicians, quote unquote. And so the point is that everybody's getting theirs at the expense of the middle class, which is destroyed, okay? And now we've got the situation, Ross Perot saying our country hangs on the precipice, and I'm telling you, the precipice has been breached, and just because right now you don't have surface-to-air missiles coming through your front door or my front door, and no one's rioting, people can't put 2 and 2 together because it is the, if you will, it's the apathy, it's the indifference, and it's the normal bias. As long as the TV goes on, as long as I can head to the Golden Arches, as long as I can do what I'm familiar with, and that's what happens when the lights go out and everything that's become familiar. I'm seeing husbands rising up against wives, wives against husbands. We're seeing people separated because people don't get it. The one mate will. A sister, I know a woman who gets it, she's brilliant. She's got smart brothers and they think she's stupid. Try and make her feel like she's crazy, and she's already made more money in the last couple months than they would make on 10 times the money in a whole year. And yet, it's funny. One of them finally said to her, in the end, you're going to be right. Even one of the ones that was mocking. So even people with big money, knowing what's coming and what's going on, even they become paralyzed by the norm or what they feel comfortable with, as long as the routine goes on and on. So I'm telling people what's going to happen to the finances. If you do not get it, meaning get it, that you are at great risk if you are leading in, especially the bigger financial institutions. Look, you can go on Bank Credit Monitor and some of the best banks in America. I'd pull it out of the big ones and put in the small ones. There are some great banks in this country that are well heeled, but the point is they all have to clear through the Fed. The American dollar is dead. Everyone knows it. The stock market only gets kept up. The stock market is like the hypnotist amulet. It just keeps going and going, or the ever-ready bunny, and everybody believes because there's motion, that's a good thing. They don't understand it is a skeleton and a whited sepulcher of a financial system. It's going to collapse, or no, that's not even accurate. It has collapsed, and yet people, as long as the band plays on, they're happy. But when they notice that the deck chairs in the Titanic are now 2 feet underwater, totally submerged, they think, hey, maybe I should have been in a lifeboat and not trying to carry out the last tango of normalcy. It's not the last tango in Paris. It is basically the death knell of a once great country. And I will just echo the black pastor that had put his website up. I forget his name, maybe Jackson. Joe, do you know what I'm talking about? Who said people who call themselves Christians had better take a look at what the Bible says, and not just because somebody says, hey, yeah, I'm a Christian, yet he's allowing the slaughter of millions of Christians and literally millions to be slaughtered, and yet, everything is good in the world of jihad and Sharia. We're in a position now where people had better wake up, because whether they want to be in the battle, whether they choose to be in the battle, whether they choose to avoid the battle, very soon the battle's coming to them. And you don't get to be a spectator sport when this stuff blows up on your porch. Please, ladies and gentlemen, understand that you have a breadth of time. I don't know the length of time. I don't know if it's weeks or months. All I know is you have a breath, and you take in a breath, and as long as that breath is still filling your lungs until you have to exhale and breathe again, you're okay, you're alive. But when the events come that take your breath away, that are designed to take you away and then take all your stuff, it becomes a moot point. If you go into the camps, your stuff becomes the spoils to the victor. And again, it's to the point now, Doug, Joe, and Phil, where the country, in my opinion, if people can't put all the foreign troops, all the military, if they can't put the vilification of veterans, of Christians, of gun owners, of everything, and the gun owners have got to go, ladies and gentlemen, they will bring a war of unimaginable proportion to the doorsteps of America. And again, you're thinking in the 1776 terms of the Minutemen versus the reality of drones, GPSs, and already targeted fire control systems with the GPS coordinates and the target priorities placed into those systems. May the Almighty God intervene in this time, because, again, the bottom line is, Doug, Joe, and Phil, we are there. If you've got 1 month or 1 week, I don't know, but I would say this: if you don't have water, you're going to be toast, no pun intended. If you don't have food, the last place you want to be is in a supermarket line during a panic, or in a prison camp waiting for your MRE or whatever. And remember this, ladies and gentlemen, if you have ever talked or heard any testimonies, the people who have been refugees said if they had it to do over, they would have acted when they saw what was taking place, and they would have moved while they have time. I don't necessarily mean out of the country. Obviously, I just mean the point is be prepared to move, but the first thing that's got to move is your mind, your thoughts, and your heart, and you've got to take this thing seriously. Even the Bible says any man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. An infidel is a dog. So, don't give me that stuff. Well, I trust God. Do you go to the dentist for a tooth? Well, yes. Do you go to the doctor if you've got a fever? Well, yes. Well, then don't tell me that, you trust God, because you trust God for some things, but God never said that, He'd bless you for doing nothing. Cooperate literally means to operate alongside of. And I can tell you this, it's just false faith to say, well, the ravens will feed me. Well, I got news for you. With that attitude, I doubt it, because there's nothing in your life that indicates you live in the realm of faith, let alone assume you will get the answers to faith. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody, but the denialists that I come across, Doug, it's 100% a deny. It applies to them.
Steve, I'm going to jump in here. Got an international question from France. This lady says, here in France, anything over 1,000 euros, you have to wait banking days.
5 banking days?
Yeah. That is my bank. I now only keep the minimum in the accounts, and it says we're hankering down on our small business accounts. You have to wait 5 business days before withdrawal of over 1,000 euros.
That's in France right now. That's taking place. You can't get your money.
Well, of course, and that's going to come. That's going to come here. I mean, can I be blunt with you? They saw it coming in France, and I don't mean to be harsh or unkind or cruel. You know, let me give you a good example of an email I get, and I'm not picking on you, Paul, but here's an inane email. Okay, food prep, waste of time. Precious metals, waste of time. Preparing, waste of time. The government will take all of it. The time now is to march on Washington, get rid of the government. It'll be too late when they take our guns. I agree with that. Then our house and our food. I'm listening to you on Hagman. All you acquire the government will take March. Okay, so Paul, this guy's name is Paul. He's in Massachusetts. What are you doing, sir, to even build a basis of understanding that people will march? You're assuming that people care. You obviously do, so I'm not picking on you. But the point is that it takes food. It takes the ability to feed the refugees. Every Christian I know, Doug, to a T, and I know some amazing people, and I know non-Christians who are the same way. They're generous. They're not acquiring the stuff for themselves. Most of them know they probably won't even make it, but they're going to trust God that the people that they are acquiring it for will benefit. That's what faith is. Look, none of the prophets saw all of this stuff that would come to pass. They looked forward to it coming to pass, but they believed because God said it would come to pass. So I am absolutely an activist. I have been. But the point is that these same people that say march on Washington, they're the people that voted most of these, and I would say these non-human entities, and that's what they truly are. I believe that if God stripped the mask out of most of the people that you think are elected officials, you would be surprised at horror movies would blush in horror. Literally, they'd be taken back by some of these non-human entities that mask themselves. And I'm not being facetious. So you can march. Okay, what do you march on? You march on Washington, D.C. What do? You demand, okay? The point is that you cannot take this government in their arena. This government must be taken, and I will tell you this, I will put the prayers of God's intercessors as being more effective than anything, anywhere, anytime in history. So the point that I'm trying to make is this, is that the idea that Phil brought up, and I'm done talking when I say this last thing, is to avoid conflict to the best of your ability. But if they bring it to you, you give them more than they even imagined you were capable of giving. You do your homework. You're the 70-year-old lady. You go to the range. You go to the gun store. You learn to shoot. It doesn't matter. If you've never held a firearm, it's amazing. Most people who are anti-gun, the minute they get one and learn they can shoot, and then they have a certain sense of now they're not going to be a victim. Imagine how quickly they change their tune. And so the point that people have got to understand, Doug, and I say this, I say it's not enough to have 10,000 rounds of ammo and 14 assault rifles, blah, 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 blah. You better be good with the one you have, the sidearm you carry. You better be able to know how to engage multiple targets at multiple distances, and it's not that hard. And by the way, I want to give a plug for Gabriel Suarez. He's got some of the best firearm training in the world. Bottom line is Suarez International, Suarez International. One of his trainers, the guy that I took some lessons from, Eric Flager, had a 1,000-yard offhand rifle shot that set, I think, a world record in that shot. And the point is, quality people, a Christian who gets it, who's a warrior and who's not a coward. If the men of God would rise up and be the men of God that they're supposed to be, this country might turn around. But if you've got the, basically, meow men in the pulpits, and I'll leave it at that, that's his kindest thing, who have conceded and given up and basically turned their back on Jesus, and the salt of the earth is no longer the salt. I'm telling you, the slaughter that's going to be prepared for the unbelievers, forgive me, not for the unbelievers, but for the
for the believers, and the unbelieving preachers in the pulpit, they will reap such judgment that I'm surprised they're not already keeling over and their pulpits dropping dead. That day will come. It's not here yet. The point is that God is giving us the types and examples of Noah. Noah had to build the ark. He gave us the types and example of Joseph. Joseph had to store 7 years. These are the pinnacles of the Christian faith. He gave us the example of the three magi coming to Jesus, giving him gold and frankincense and myrrh, which incidentally is what Jesus and his mother Mary and Joseph lived on in Egypt for those years. He had to flee for his life. And oh, by the way, why couldn't God just wipe out Herod and let Jesus stay? Well, obviously, God had to allow certain events to take place so that the fullness of time would manifest. So, again, when I hear people say, oh, I just trust God, no, you don't, because if you did trust God, you wouldn't have to say that. You'd be showing by example. James says, show me your works, and I'll believe you have faith. But don't tell me you have faith and have no works. It's the same thing in choosing people who are gifted. Now, the exception to that is if you find someone who's a tremendously gifted, talented man, and let's say he's down on his luck, as they used to say during the Depression, or he's been really under the hammer of the system, and he's got skills and talents, that's the exception to that, because a man's abilities will make way for him. Believe me, you're not going to kick a doctor out if you got someone who's really sick in your group, and that's what you need to pray for. You need to pray that you will understand not only the lateness of the hour, but ask God to give you an individual plan. I don't have all the answers, God forbid. I know I don't. Phil doesn't have all the answers, but the point is that you can get your answers because there's plenty of stuff out there. And if you don't even make the effort to, quote, store water, well, the government will just come and take it. Well, the government will just come and take it. Yeah, they're going to take your bloody life. So you might as well get the stuff that enables you to live life to basically withstand evil while you can. It's like the guy who sits by and says, well, I'm just going to watch all the Christian women be raped because I don't believe in defending myself. And I thought, you chicken, you know what, fill in the word, God forbid that you would ever be called a brother of mine, because if you will sit and allow an innocent human being to be slaughtered, then you have lost your humanity. And, Doug, I deal with those kind of people day in, day out. They call, they want to rant and change my theology. They've never won anybody to the Lord. They've never helped anybody. All they do is absolutely, and I'll use the word here, gripe or complain, and that they don't care for their fellow men. What Phil is trying to do and I'm trying to do is to tell people there is no such thing as doomsday, and if you'll take a plan, activate that plan, do what you can do, then obviously you're on the right footing and you'll be surprised what will come your way.
Well said, Steve. And I just want to dovetail, before we turn this back over to Phil, just really quick, I just want to dovetail what you said, that emailer, Paul. Again, not to pick on him, but, March on Washington. I contacted, I think it was 18 people last week in my area, and these are people who said, look, boy, when the stuff hits the fan, I'm going to be ready. Well, they've got handguns, but they haven't shot them. So I said, look, we got a class down in a couple of miles from us. We can take a defense course. You can get practiced up, get your shoot off a couple hundred rounds, get very good at it. Look, out of again 18 people I contacted, only one person said yes, I'll do it, and the price was not even an issue. In fact, the instructor said, look, if they don't have the money, just bring them, just get the bodies here, we'll do it. And that's the thing. 18 people, one taker, and that one person drove 2 hours just to get to my office, basically, and from here, then another 20 minutes to get to where we were going. So, you're not going to mobilize people. It's just, for a march, organized march or whatever, it's just not going to happen. So there you go. I just wanted to say that. But thank you, Steve, for all of that. Phil, are you there? Did we lose you?
I'm here.
How does it feel to be a listener? Anyway, Phil, we've got about 25 minutes left of the program. We got to get serious about what we need to do practically, tactically, mentally, everything. Take it right from, let's hit it real hard here. what are we preparing for? Economic collapse, certainly. Having no. I mean, let's. What do people need to do right now? What's the most important thing people can do if they're at zero or if they're at, well prepared? What do we need to do? Let's get some good information out there for people to really say, okay, I'm going to do this tomorrow. If somebody says, look, what do I do tomorrow to help to start preparing? What should they do?
Well, I think we've already mentioned it. Number one, start where they are.
Yep.
And look at what they're using every day and over a week's time, what they're using for food, and start within their capability, putting a little bit aside, building a little bit of reserve, putting a couple extra cans of this or that, or a couple jars of applesauce and spaghetti sauce in the pantry. So if things come down tomorrow, they've got a little bit of a cushion there. They've got a little bit of an ability to adjust, and they've got some options. So that's the first key. Whether it's water, whether it's food, build yourself a little bit of options. Go out and buy some batteries for your flashlight. Go out and buy a new flashlight. Get an LED flashlight. Start doing these little things. But the key, the big key, it's all about what's in your head. Start with what's in your head first, because what we've been talking about here, and this is a broken record in history. I talked about this book, Fugitives of the Forest. The same thing happened there. They'd have these Jews all in these different ghettos around Poland, all right? And they'd hear about how the Nazis slaughtered all the Jews in one ghetto, and they were in such denial. These partisans had come out of Jewish partisans had come out of the woods and say, "Hey, come with us, come on, flee into the woods with us." And they'd say, "No, and they tell them, "Well, they just murdered 10,000 Jews over in this ghetto." He goes, "Oh yeah, but the Germans we have here are nice Germans. They're not like the Germans that were over there." This denial syndrome. You need to deal with your denial syndrome. You've got to face reality and have faith that there is, if you will just make the effort and move forward, that there is a solution out there.
That's
the first thing.
Yeah. You said, Phil, jump in here. What you just said is real important. We have to have faith. We have to have faith in the Lord. First and foremost, we have to take that step to bring Him into our lives so He can help us make the decisions that we need to make in these times of hardship that are going to come upon us. And I just wanted to say that, in my opinion, you said, we have to get our mind right. You're exactly right. We also have to get our hearts right. And
Correct.
We have to have these in sync with the Lord, first and foremost. And that, and I think we kind of didn't, mention or harp on that too much today, because we all seem to, I hope we all have the understanding that the Lord comes first, and then the preparedness comes second.
Well, I think, hey, Joe, let me just step right in here, too. I think the thing is that here's the thing. Pollyanna does the end times, okay? I was going to write a cynical, if you will, kind of half tongue-in-cheek, and Pollyanna, Aunt Polly from the Tom Sawyer, in essence, the naive people trying to say this will be different or this will change if we just all basically hold our breath, sing Kumbaya, and stay cool, okay? What I try and get across is this, is when in the Old West nothing changed, and this is, you got to ask yourself, why is everything going after the guns? Because freemen, I'm talking about men who are free, liberty demands firearms to keep your liberty. Without the Second Amendment, everything else is gone. And by the way, it's the last thing they're going for. Whether you want to admit it or not, due process is dead. Freedom of speech is dead. Oh, you still say some things, excuse me, but the point is the media whores are bought and paid for. They would make Goebbels, okay? Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi
propaganda minister, he'd blush at the effectiveness. Those of you who still believe that network news can be trusted are already dead, because you are the programmees of the most sophisticated mind control experiment in the history of the world. Now, that's pretty strong, okay? But I will give you instances over and over and over of telling a lie, telling a big enough lie, telling it enough times, and pretty soon people say, oh, that must be the truth. In America, truth is one man lies, another swears to it, and the media continues to harp on the lie. How is that effective? First of all, we're talking about practical preparedness. You have to understand the battle is going to come to you. It's going to be financial. It's going to be spiritual, the gates of hell. It's going to be the most taxing time in the history of the world. Well, we've had wars before, Steve, and we've pulled out by the old American spirit. The American spirit was based on values. Values determine. We are now under a full-scale communist revolution. And, you know, it's funny because so many people don't want to use that word, but global communism, it's like Animal Farm on steroids. Even the new versions of 1984 don't even put in George Orwell's original introduction. You see, the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, America's the best country in the world. We intend to change all that. How do you like change? You no longer have your freedoms. The military's falling apart. In the last 48 hours, somebody big in the world of black ops died. I don't know if they're good guys or bad guys. Every day, stuff's going on that you and I aren't allowed to know about because, again, the veneer has to be polished and kept. The matrix is going to fail. It's absolutely going to come apart. And when the matrix fails, men's hearts are going to fail them for fear of looking after those things. I tell everybody this: if you've got a rifle, you go out to the range this weekend and you get good at it. If you've got 1,000 rounds, spend 500 rounds or at least 250 rounds. Practice, practice, practice. Because something tells me that your skill levels will be challenged in the near future. When you've got telephones that are pre-programmed with basically riot instructions, and when you've got army dumps or ammo dumps ready to be turned into the hands of those that are considered nothing more than dregs of society. I'm not calling them that. That's what they're being called behind the scene. When you've got Doug Source laughing, or not, he's not laughing, but the higher-ups are laughing at the American taxpayer paying for everything that's going to kill them, when you've got the stories of billions of rounds of ammo being sold, when you've got the story of rifles being sold, when you've got the gangs being told, just hold your patience for a little bit longer, and you've got an if you will, an intra-communication system that's orchestrated by some of the most vehement, Constitution, freedom-hating men and women in the world. You don't think we got a problem? You think it's melodramatic? Look, even though the cry has gone out, very few have answered. That's why political activism cannot change this. Everything that could have changed, and I said this when the Tea Party movement they wanted the Tea Party movement. They needed the Tree of Life movement. They needed the repentance. We needed to repent. We needed to basically say there's something wrong with our foundational values. But you know what? Everybody shut up. Everybody went to their, easy chair. Everybody went to that which was familiar, and the familiar will kill you. And that's what they're counting on. Normalcy bias, and it's also a form of containment. Entertainment and containment. Think of it. They both end in ENT. What is that saying? It is a subliminal, if you will. It is an infrasonic attempt to mind control the masses so the masses never wake up. And everybody's already plugged into the Borg. There's a reason why Apple stock is as high as it is. I mean, Apple makes cool stuff. But the point being is that now we've got a situation where look at the young people. Look at anybody. Look at husbands and wives sitting down to dinner. Everybody's playing with their phones or their iPads or their iPods. I mean, I watched it tonight. I went out to dinner, Doug, so I could be back for the show. I would say this, out of 20 people I saw in my near vicinity in booths, at least half of them were playing with their phones and stuff. They're plugged in, the board. You are being assimilated. No, I take that back. You have been assimilated. And so we've got to talk about shelter. Again, probably the thing that people have got to understand is this. Practical preparation it's all encompassing, you know. But I want to just address the issue tonight of firearms. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are women, go to a firearms store, a gun store. Go to some place that offers firearm instruction and try out the pistols. Most women, not all women, I know women who are as good with 45s have made Jeff Cooper blush, okay? But most women are more well-served with a 9mm or a 40 Smith & Wesson with a muzzle brake. A muzzle brake just means a compensating device or a magneporting. But, you know, the point is go and get good with that. When you do that, you will be underestimated by your enemy. And being underestimated by your enemy gives you an advance and an option you wouldn't have if you had nothing. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we are to fight the good fight of faith. We are to resist evil. And for most of the people that I know, they're already ready to lay down and die, or, as Doug, you know, and maybe, you know, Phil, I don't know if you've listened to the time I've been on this show or other shows, but most people I know, even some of them that are listening to us, the first thing they want to do, they want to go buy a gun, but they don't realize they're not to take their own life, they're to protect their life. Their life is a gift. So learning to shoot effectively. For those of you that have never handled a firearm, there are amazing sites. You can go to Gunsight. You can go to any of the schools while you can, or you can read from Suarez International. There are just amazing places out there that will help you. And I'll tell you this, and you guys, I used to own an indoor shooting range. I've been in the firearms business for 30 years. Women invariably can be taught to be better marksmen sooner than men. All men think they're Wyatt Earp. Women don't believe that. I'll tell you what, I've watched it too many times in training women over men. Now, obviously, if someone's in law enforcement or the military, they've got an edge. But when you take the average woman who's trained, they don't lack the skill. And their focus is amazing. So I don't care if you're 60. I don't care if you're 70. I don't care if you're 80. I don't care if you're 20. But please, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who can, get firearm instruction immediately. And those of you who have never handled, because your lives and the lives of your loved ones, it's not about saving your life, it's about saving other people's lives. And I can't stress that enough. Probably the most important thing that anyone can do is to basically have a determined and a pre-planned situation, if you will, a plan for a situation that ever might arise, okay? If this happens and this happens, the last place you want to be is in a line. I don't care if you're a refugee, a food line, a water line, you do not want to be there. And the last place you want to be is in the gossip line. If people won't listen to you now, don't continue to talk to them. Ask God to show you who to talk to. Do not waste your breath on one more person that doesn't get it. You know why? You'll be happier, you'll be less frustrated, and it will be less dangerous for you in the years ahead. They say you're crazy, you just say, yep, you're right, and you go off smiling, knowing that you'll see who's crazy. So, Doug, the point is we are in a tactical situation right now. We are in a practical situation. If people don't take the threat, as real as it is, if they won't even take the step to take control of their finances, if they don't understand that fractional reserve banking, someone who puts $100,000 in the bank, at the best of time, the bank is only required to keep $1,000 to $3,000. And I shared a vision on my website. People, I don't like those visions. Well, tough. Get your own website. But the point is, the woman was praying and praying and praying. The Lord showed her that every time she deposited money in the bank, behind the facade, it was just a bombed-out structure, and it was just falling to the floor. In other words, it had no value. God got her attention. Another woman who was critical of me, and God knows there are plenty of those, men and women, she said she was really having a problem with this gold and silver thing until God gave her a dream. And she was trying to flee the United States after the Russian invasion. She comes to a border guard in one of the states, and he basically says, what do you have for your life? And she says, well, I have some silver. He said, silver is for food, gold is for your life. And that got her attention. Did God let her see something in the future? It appears to me he did. The bottom line in all this stuff, the bottom line just simply means I've overused it for 20 years, might as well overuse it tonight. When you cut through all the garbage, when you cut through all the crap, when you cut through all the denial, when you cut through all the apathy, the indifference, the laziness, and the fear, you're left with a very profound realization that this country is no longer a country that fears God. This country is no longer a country that values human life after 60, 70 million little babies aborted. This is a country that throws its fighting men and women on the trash heap, close to 1 million vets being denied benefits. This is a country that abandons its fighting men and then turns around and says there's terrorists and then puts action into motion to basically kill the ones that are the most threat. This is a God-denying, God-hating, media-driven, insane asylum that's choosing death by absolutely rejecting the author and finisher of life. And there is no way to have the fear of the Lord or the blessing of the Lord when you embrace every form of evil, every form of everything. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't just sodomy that got Sodom and Gomorrah whacked. It was that the violence was in the earth. It becomes more vile and vile daily. The sorcery and the pharmaceutical industries, when the pills quit flowing, you guys, everybody who has been addicted to anti-anxiety medicine and antidepressant, what's going to happen? See, they've created, Joe, the very zombie-like atmosphere. They create the problem, they provide the solution. And in case everybody hasn't figured it out yet, the zombie protocol means everybody other than the elite. And that's how they see you, and that's how they intend to deal with you. God granted people in this country the ability to see what they've never seen before. That's my prayer.
Amen. And let them have open eyes and accept, with the whole heart, the Lord Jesus Christ. No matter what state you're in now, no matter how bad life seems to be, it can always get worse. And there's only one solution to that problem. And that problem is most likely a spiritual problem. And we need to know where the solution lies, and that is with the Lord Jesus Christ. And He died for our sins so we may be forgiven. And the least we can do is, stay faithful to Him, spread His gospel, show other people, be the example. Don't just talk about it, be the example.
Folks.
Well, I agree. And by the way, I want to give out one of the best survival sites I know. Mike and Brad run Full Spectrum Survival. It's all one word. FULL Spectrum, SPECTRUM Survival.com. I post their stuff on my website. Had a great talk with them today. These guys get it. They're believers, and they're doing some amazing work, and they're going to be doing a video soon on escape and evasion. If you want to have a head start on everybody who's going into the prison camps thinking you're going to be so used of God in those things, you're going to be in for a big surprise. But I would recommend you look at Survival, Escape, and Evasion. Actually, there's an Air Force manual. Talk to your Air Force pilot friends. Let them tell you what it's like to be held in captivity. Let someone who's ever been waterboarded tell you what it's like to be waterboarded, because this Pollyanna lollipop of group hugging is about to come to an end, and I refuse, Doug, by the grace of God, to cater or pander to meow people, and that's all I know how to say without getting myself in trouble. Meow people are all around.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And, we just pulled up Full Spectrum Survival, and folks, what we're going to do following this program is create some links on our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, and of course, SteveQuayle.com takes you to Dry Harvest, which is Phil's website. We're getting close to the close of the program. Phil, any final comments, my friend?
Some quick final comments here. One thing I've noticed over the years is you got two extremes of people sometimes, and it's hard to get the balance in between. You have the people that are in total denial, and you got the people that get so engrossed in the problem that sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, again, start where you are. Take one footstep at a time and be aware of what the problems are, but pivot your attention to primarily focusing on the desired outcome. In other words, if you believe you can't do it, it's probably right. Belief is one of the strongest powers in the universe, second only to love. But so I think it's important that you have a vision of where you want to go, and you really have the belief that there is a solution and you can get there. The other thing is, the last thing on food is that we didn't get to talk about is that there are some real shortages coming up. We're seeing the corn crop was devastated, and there's so much in the food industry that pivots on corn, feed, poultry, everything. And we're seeing, I think, a 33% increase in corn, 33 to 50%. Anyhow, we're also seeing similar impacts. Like, for instance, we bring olive oil in the country, and I think we've seen a 50% increase over the last week in olive oil, and that has to do with the euro and the U.S. dollar. Plus, here in Montana, hay, as I think Steve mentioned, it just jumped from 120 a ton to around 200 a ton. I mean, these things all have impact. And so what's happening in the system now with the farmers, a lot of farmers are looking at thinning their herds because it's not cost-effective to feed some of those animals. So this has long-term ramifications. It compounds shortage issues and impacts supply and demand, 6 months or a year from now. So, and it takes time to reverse some of these cycles. So right now you can get food, and if you're listening, your ears are working, you need to heed what's going on and take effective steps to turn your concerns into constructive actions and do something. So that's it, and appreciate you letting us be on your show. And again, if any of you folks are interested in food, you can give us a call at 406-223-4555 or go to DRI-harvestfoods.com, and an easy way to get there, you can go to callnow.org, and it'll automatically dump you into our website. That's callnow.org.
That's pretty good. Okay. Good. Okay. Very good.
And the last thing is a little quote from John Quincy Adams. He said, "Duty is ours, results are God's."
I love it. I love it. Steve, you got about a minute and a half. Anything you want to say?
Well, I think the bottom line in everything is that you have to know that men who have stood for liberty, fought for liberty, and given their lives for liberty, the ultimate example of that is Jesus. And my answer to everyone is when they say, what's the first thing that I can do or should do or must do? Get right with Jesus, because the bottom line is the world hates him, and when the very people that are trying to kill us are doing everything they can to profane his name, deny his name, and kill his people, we've seen where that leads. It leads to the resurrection of the King of Glory who's coming back, and the Bible says that they that know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And I'm praying for the men and women that I know that have listened to and I've been blessed to minister to for 20 years on the radio. I'm praying that they rise up in the strength and power of Almighty God and absolutely do not surrender to evil at any time, any place, anywhere. Be strong in the power of the Lord's might and encourage one another while it's yet day. For Jesus said the night comes when no man can work. And brothers, we're at twilight time.
Amen. Joe, go ahead and take us out.
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Philip Hogue for being on our show. It was a blessing and an honor. And Steve, as always, love hearing from you, and love to have you both back on the show. And I suggest everybody get this show, get the archive, spread it around, give it to your friends.
Right.
Yeah. Practical and tactical preparedness. things you can do to make the coming dangers and I don't know, the possible collapse of a whole society, the whole world.
I just love what Phil said. Focus on the outcome. Focus on the outcome, the desired outcome. And there you have it.
And first and foremost, put Jesus Christ in the center, the number one thing in your life, and from there, your answers will come.
Right on. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.